Rain or drizzle to start the day across England and Wales. Still some early brightness though across parts of Scotland, but I think for most areas it will be cloudy. Across the south, whilst it will be cloudy, it will be mainly dry, but we will see heavy and more persistent rain spreading in across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland through the afternoon. But despite the cloud, a very mild day to come across many parts. 7 or 8 degrees across Scotland, 12 or 13 in the south is above where they should be for the time of the year. But as I said, those winds really start to strengthen through Sunday night, the early hours of Monday morning across northwestern parts of Scotland. In exposure, we can see gusts over 80 to 90 miles an hour, with a warning already in force for that.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 3 hours I'll be keeping you company with the stories that really matter all over the country. Plenty coming up. We'll be discussing Plan B and asking, will you obey and follow the rules this time round? We'll also be discussing care homes and whether dog owners are the ones that really need to be trained. But first, with all of the news, here's Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alastair. This is your news at 12 o'clock. New allegations have emerged of COVID rules being broken following reports Treasury staff had office drinks during lockdown. The Treasury says it did not organise a party last year, but it's aware of a number of people that had impromptu drinks after working on the autumn spending review. It follows an investigation into several festive events in Downing Street in the run-up to last Christmas. Despite calls for the Prime Minister's resignation, he still has support within his party.
He went on to win a strong majority of the party membership, and then he led us to a victory with a big majority in Parliament. And I think you'll find the Prime Minister still has the confidence and support of the parliamentary party. There are clearly rows and disagreements going on about some of the policies and some of the actions, but that's quite normal in a lively government.
And to think that there were parties going on, we don't need an investigation. We know there were parties going on. We know the dates that they happened in Downing Street. It's just sickening. And so I do think this is a matter of moral authority for the Prime Minister, and for the first time in his overprivileged life, he has to do the right thing. He has to understand the hurt, the anger that this has caused, and the damage that it's done to public health advice coming out of government.
Stricter COVID rules have come into force in Scotland. The government says all household contacts of positive cases should now isolate for 10 days, regardless of their vaccination status. That's as experts warn Omicron could become the dominant strain in the UK by next week. Health officials are urging all eligible people to get their booster jab, with new evidence showing a third dose significantly reduces symptomatic infection with the new variant. New guidance is also expected to be introduced for care homes from Wednesday. Residents will be restricted to 3 visitors and 1 essential care worker as part of measures to curb the spread of Omicron. Staff testing will also be increased from 2 lateral flow tests per week to 3, alongside a weekly PCR test. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 50 people are feared dead in Kentucky, and a search and rescue operation is underway in the southern Illinois after an Amazon warehouse collapsed. The Kentucky governor has declared a state of emergency, saying 4 tornadoes caused damage in over a dozen counties, one of them tracking more than 200 miles.
This has been one of the toughest nights in Kentucky history, and some areas have been hit in ways that are hard to put into words. To all of our Kentucky families that are impacted by this, we want you to know that we are here for you. We love you. We are praying for you.
The Foreign Secretary has called for a united front against hostile behaviour by Russia. Liz Truss spoke during a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Liverpool. She also expressed deep concern about the amassing of troops near the Ukrainian border, warning Russia faces severe consequences if it invades its neighbour. And England have been fined their entire match fee and docked 5 ICC World Test Championships points for a slow over rate in the first Ashes Test. The side was ruled to be 5 short of the target overs. Australia beat England by 9 wickets in Brisbane. You're right up to date. Now back to Alastair Stewart.
Thanks, Bethany. Coming up this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends, from Monday, people should work from home if they can, and from Wednesday, an NHS COVID pass becomes mandatory in specific settings. So, as we move into Plan B of the COVID restrictions, my big question today is very simple. Will you obey the rules this time round? As part of Plan B to protect care home residents from COVID, each resident can only have 3 named visitors. With many care homes facing staff shortages as it is, will they be able to cope with more measures to follow? One thing that gets me feeling festive is the Christmas panto season, and I'll be talking to one of my dear friends about what makes a good show. And what's a Saturday afternoon without a little bit of sport? We'll have the latest on the Ashes first test and look ahead to all of the matches in the Premier League. And I think there's a bit of motor racing going on as well. But first, our big story today. Like many of you, I suspect, I went to sleep with the words of Michael Gove on Omicron ringing in my ears. He'd just chaired a meeting of COBRA, the government's emergencies committee, and said the UK faces, and I quote, a deeply concerning situation because of the fast rate the Omicron variant, only identified a fortnight ago, is already spreading across the country. They'd considered some very challenging new information, he said. Omicron is more likely than past COVID-19 variants to potentially lead to hospital admissions among the fully vaccinated. He added that the Omicron variant is doubling every 2 to 3 days in England and possibly even faster in Scotland. He went on to say, we know that 30% of reported cases in London are of the Omicron variant. And he concluded, we absolutely need to keep everything under review, prompting many to speculate in this morning's newspapers, not of Plan B, but of Plan C. Now, remember, it was only on Wednesday that Plan B was confirmed. For some time, ministers have said, perhaps more in hope than expectation, that it wouldn't be needed. Then along came Omicron. And here it is. Face masks have already become compulsory again in most public indoor venues other than hospitality. From Monday, as I said, people should work from home if they can. And from Wednesday, an NHS COVID pass becomes mandatory in specific settings using a negative test or full vaccination via the NHS COVID pass. Ministers stress vaccines and testing remain our best lines of defence. Meanwhile, and again I quote the government, urgent work has been ongoing to understand the impact of the new variant with regards to vaccines, treatments and transmissibility. Now, that last paragraph, in my view, is vital. Despite Michael Gove's claim of caution, there is much that we still simply don't know. There's a lot of could, might and possibly in what the officials are telling us. So Plan B, in truth, is a better safe than sorry move. Opposition, however, is huge. Those in hospitality and travel are gravely concerned that they might not even survive this second hit. Teachers are concerned about further disruptions in schooling in the run-up to the holidays and on the return in January. And significantly, many Tory MPs don't like it because they feel it's an overreaction based on limited facts and, what's worse, they see it, as I know many of you do, as a further infringement of our civil liberties. The cry from some commentators and many of the public is simply, no, we won't obey. When the plan was confirmed at a press conference on Wednesday, most of the follow-up questions from journalists were about parties or gatherings, said to have happened in Downing Street a year ago, with the one rule for us and another rule for them mantra to the fore. But I think that also speaks to another grave concern. So embroiled is the Prime Minister in rows about parties, denials of parties, the refurbishment of his flat in Downing Street, who paid for it and who asked for the money and the rest of it, frankly much more besides, that his trust, his credibility is on the line. I am not Boris bashing, as some of you have accused me on social media. I'm simply stating the facts. And if you don't trust him or his government, then why would you do what he tells you to do? That's the real problem. I would, if I was persuaded that the threat was clear and present and not just some Machiavellian ploy to distract me and others from what really matters. So today, I want to find out, with a panel of experts from all sides of the argument, and I want to hear what you think. How worried are you? How persuaded are you by Plan B? Will you obey? And if not, why not? As I said, we have a brilliant and balanced panel today, and I'm going to go through them one by one, give them plenty of time to express their views. You listen to it and tell me who you think is right and who is wrong. And I'm delighted to be starting with Sir Andrew McMichael. Sir Andrew is Professor of Immunology of Molecular Medicine at the University of Oxford. So let's start off, if we may, with those new restrictions. Will you obey?
Yes, I will obey. And I think they are timely and needed. I think we're in a very perilous position at the minute.
So how persuaded are you then of the dangers of Omicron, given that Whitty and Valence and Gove last night said there's still so much more that we need to find out?
Yes, we need to wait and see how serious the infections are in people. And there's a hope that this will not cause the very severe, life-threatening infections so frequently in those unvaccinated or partly vaccinated. So there might be a little vaccine protection there. But we do know from the molecular investigations of this virus, which are done very quickly, that it has mutated so that it does not bind most of the antibodies very well. And in other words, it's escaped from these immune responses. And it's really like the first virus when nobody was immune. And it also looks like it's a very infectious virus that's spreading very rapidly, as you said, doubling every couple of days.
Absolutely fascinating. Thus the point that's in all of the papers and from the lips of many eminent scientists like yourself, that 2 jabs are not enough. You've got to have the booster as well.
Yes, I mean, I think it looks like the booster does give you some protection from infection, maybe up to 70%, which is very good.
Yeah.
Two jabs may not, and it may be just after the second jab there may be some protection, but it fades. But it may protect you from severe disease because of other kinds of immune response, like the T cells, which are important for protection against severe disease.
Sure. Here's one of the problems. Many of those who are uncomfortable with Plan B say, although there have been getting on for 1,000 infections and doubling every day with an R rate of 3.7 and all the rest of it, no one's ended up in hospital yet because of Omicron, and no one's died. Ergo, why should I adapt my lifestyle to Plan B?
Well, I think we can't be sure about that until it's been around for about 3 to 4 weeks. The course of a severe infection is it starts fairly mild, and you may rumble on for a couple of weeks, and then it suddenly starts getting worse. And you may remember when Boris was suddenly admitted to hospital after appearing to be okay for a week or two, and then needed the urgent treatment. And I think we have to wait and see whether we're into that situation.
OK. Is there any argument, Professor, for herd immunity, saying, look, that's what it looks like right now. Let it rip for a little while longer, and maybe in this instance, herd immunity might just work this time?
I think a herd immunity might come later when more and more people have been infected. I mean, if it's going to be doubling every couple of days, that's 1 million-fold in 6 weeks. So there will be a lot of people infected, I think, by February. And then you may get some degree of herd immunity together with the vaccine protection, which will be increased by people having booster doses. But I think we have to think very carefully about whether, if this thing is going to be with us forever, which is quite likely, how many deaths a day do we accept? 200 a day, which is what it was very recently. That's 1,000, more than 1,000 a week. It's 2 jumbo jets crashing every week. I mean, we can't really accept that. We might accept something a bit less, but not that level.
OK, final question, and I genuinely don't mind if you flat bat it because you're invited on the programme as an eminent professor and scientist. But how troubled are you as an eminent professor and scientist at the lack of public trust, for all sorts of reasons, that there is out there amongst the public in our leaders telling them what to do?
Well, I think a lot of the public have taken it on board very, very much, and we're one of the best vaccinated countries in the world. But there is a resistant core of people who are suspicious of the vaccines, and for various reasons, sometimes they can be talked through it and it can be explained. But these people are really at risk because I think everybody is going to get this virus at some point. And if you're not vaccinated, it could be quite severe. If you have been vaccinated 2 or 3 times, then maybe it will be quite mild, or maybe even not at all.
Professor Sir Andrew McMichael of the University of Oxford, thank you so much for your time this Saturday afternoon. Thank you for your thoughts and for your calm guidance. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
I'm now joined by someone who may not be a huge supporter of Plan B. In fact, I know for a fact he isn't. Alan Miller, who's the co-founder of the campaign group Open for All and the Better Together Declaration. Alan, good to have you on board as well. How persuaded are you that Omicron does pose a real and present threat?
I think that what we have to do is everyone keeps saying, look at the science, look at the data, look at the evidence. And what we know from South Africa is that whilst it spreads very fast, rapidly, they're mild symptoms. All the doctors that have assessed it and evaluated it and brought it to our attention. I think it also needs to be noted that when figures like Sir Andrew McMichael put out, we have over 400 deaths of cancer a day. We now got a backlog at the NHS of millions of people waiting because of lockdowns and restrictions. And we should be doing what Chris Whitty said, which is like living with the flu now. The consequences for restrictions are very damaging. On the one hand, economically, which also has an impact on the NHS and everything else, but also obviously for our civil liberties and our rights. The idea that we impose restrictions that make no sense, vaccine passports, when we know that transmissions occur, we're just being told that, 2 vaccines may not protect you, a third might or might not. We now have more boosters than the 15 million jabs to freedom. What we know about transmissibility is that as new variants come around, which they always do, that they become less damaging. And we've seen that. Obviously, originally the discussion was to protect the NHS. There's about 5% of people in hospital beds with COVID. And I think that's in the context also of many, many beds that have been cut and spaces that are larger to deal with COVID. So we've got this overall context, but the when in doubt, regulate and restrict is an enormously damaging. I think that
Alan,
people should sign together.
Let me come in at that point, Alan, just to I wanted you to get your full argument out there, and I think you'd got to that crucial point. I just want to take you back to one thing that Sir Andrew also said, and he on the infection rate, and I take your argument about hospitalisations, what have you, but he said we don't know yet, and that's one of my hang-ups about it. We don't know yet. He said it's going to be another 2 to 3 weeks before we know whether these are infections, which are rising, doubling virtually every day, will lead to hospitals. Therefore, it's probably better to be safe than sorry.
So it's a very good question. We've had it all the time posed with modelers, and we just don't know. And what we then do is do something we've never done before in a pandemic, which is we've had lockdowns and restrictions. We had a pandemic strategy up until the point where suddenly many of the world's nations decided to make a lockdown. Not all of them did it in the same way. We saw Sweden take a very different approach. The point is that we need to be balanced and reasonable. What we also know is personal responsibility, that when people really think that they're in danger, they start taking measures themselves. That happened before the first lockdown, as it happens. I think the thing is that we also are not talking about people who have immunity having had COVID, which is a significant amount. Why are we not doing that? And let's look at the restrictions and impositions. Mask wearing. Very little evidence or efficacy for any of that. It's theatre. They're not even in all places. It's just seen as something must be done. Vaccine passports, enormously damaging from the point of view of business. We've lost over hundreds of thousands of jobs and tens of thousands of venues. But what this is a show me your digital health ID, show me your papers to participate in society. We never agreed to this. We now see that there's over 60 Conservative MPs that are going to be voting against this on Tuesday. We know that Labour MPs are going to be voting against as well. I think the irony of all the discussion about parties and everything is that is Boris going to rely, is it going to become a Labour government primarily, that they are going to be the ones pushing this through? And whilst they're criticising him, what some of them are arguing for is more restrictions. The time is now for the public to have our voices heard together. That's why we've got the togetherdeclaration.org, and we've been doing a campaign to question our MPs and to say that we're going to be voting on the basis of where they stand on this issue. Vaccine passports are a charade. They do nothing to do with health, but everything to do with creating a digital show me your health ID, show me your paper society. They need to be got rid of everywhere. We know where people are highly vaccinated and they have vaccine passports, that transmissions continue. And one other point about this, whilst we talk about cases, because we have testing, 1 million a day, whilst we talk about that, testing and cases is not sicknesses and or deaths. And we need to be not guided now by people who are only thinking about tests and cases, but the overall context of our economy, our society, all of our other health issues. There's a massive concern about stroke, heart disease, cancer, all the education, mental health issues, and we need to get some balance in this. We need to get back.
All right,
to
Alan, I'm going to stop it. Thank you so much. You heard me and did stop there. Balance is crucial, and I wanted to give the same amount of time to Sir Andrew McMichael as to you, and I think, roughly speaking, that we did. Message received loud and clear, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Alan Miller with his views there. Intriguingly, not underlining the I'm not going to do it because someone I don't trust told me argument, but because he does believe it's an unnecessary infringement of civil liberties, as well as having his doubts about the medicine, although he did agree with some of what Sir Andrew had to say. And we'll have one of those MPs, Tory MPs, a little later in the programme, who is contemplating voting against the government on Plan B come Tuesday of next week. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we will indeed be continuing that conversation throughout the show. Lots more coming up as well, not least the reintroduction of measures such as masks and vaccine passports. but also care homes in England, seeing yet another restriction on the numbers of visitors allowed in there to see their loved ones and their friends. We'll be asking, how are they going to cope? But first, let's have a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Ahead to this afternoon, cloud and rail will continue to move eastwards across many parts of the country. Let's take a look at the details. In southwest England, you will see a lot of cloud with outbreaks of rain, low cloud leading to hill and coastal fog as the day wears on, mild for the time of year. Cloud will continue to increase across southeast England with a few spots of rain developing here and there, chilly with highs of 7 Celsius. Moving on to Cardiff and South Wales, it will be a wet afternoon with rain turning heavy at times, especially over the higher ground, breezy but mild for all. Across the Midlands and into northwest England, outbreaks of rain will continue to move eastwards. The rain will be heavy at times and it will feel quite chilly, especially in the breeze. Over to northeast England and in Newcastle, the rain will be a little lighter and patchier in nature, perhaps a few brighter spells developing from time to time. A chilly afternoon to come for many. Sunshine and showers for northern Scotland as the rain begins to clear here. Southern Scotland will remain cloudier with patchy rain continuing, turning milder from the west through to the afternoon. A dull, damp afternoon to come across Belfast and the rest of Northern Ireland. Patchy rain and drizzle in places with extensive hill fog. Mild and breezy with temperatures reaching around 12 Celsius. Through to the evening, the rain will continue its journey eastwards.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. And we're going to stick with the coronavirus and Plan B, but with a little nuance, because we're going to talk about care homes. Residents will now only be allowed 3 people who can visit regularly under the new plans, set to kick in on Wednesday. Now, it's an attempt to try to protect them from the Omicron variant, the Department of Health say. They're balancing the current COVID-19 risk and the need to keep people safe in line with clinical advice. Well, it's been a sector that certainly had a tough old time from start to finish. So let's have a look at the new developments with Joyce Pinfield, who is a spokeswoman for the National Care Association. Joyce, good of you to join us this afternoon. I'd like to be very honest with our viewers. Did I get it right in that introduction to basically what you face early on next week? What have you been told about the plans?
Good afternoon, Alastair. Yes, you're...
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
Just send your message to gbviews at gbnews.uk. And we're also going to be talking a little bit later on about the training of dogs. One of the reasons for that, and you choose whatever newspaper you want to take. I like to take as many as I can, but look at this. Wonderful one there, a lovely dog there, and it's in the Daily Telegraph, and the headline is "Bad dog owners should be brought to heel instead of their pets." We'll be discussing that a little bit later on. It all goes back to the Dangerous Dogs Act that came in when there was a wave of attacks, and it was a classic example of not terribly good legislation, perhaps as a knee-jerk reaction, but there's a great report now from Middlesex University which will allow us to discuss that a little later on. Now, we're still working on Joyce Pinfield, so we're going to go to a break, or we're going to go to the bulletin? We're going to take a quick break, and we'll then sort out Joyce Pinfield, and all will be, I hope, revealed. Stay with us.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. These are your latest headlines. New allegations have emerged of COVID rules being broken after reports Treasury staff had office drinks during lockdown. It follows a week of controversy surrounding parties in Downing Street in the run-up to last Christmas. Drinks after working on the autumn spending review. Strict status. That's as experts warn Omicron could become the dominant strain in the UK by next week. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 50 people are feared dead in Kentucky, and a search and rescue operation is underway in southern Illinois after an Amazon warehouse collapsed. The UK has come to an agreement with Norway and the EU over how to share fish stocks in the North Sea next year. The government say the catch levels are worth an estimated £190 million to the UK fishing industry, but catch sector bosses say it doesn't resolve the issues around access to Norwegian waters after talks between London and Oslo collapsed earlier this year. And England have been fined their entire match fee and docked 5 ICC World Test Championship points for a slow rate of overs in the first Ashes Test. The side was ruled to be 5 short of the target overs. Australia beat England by 9 wickets in Brisbane. That's your latest. I'll be back in half an hour.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. I am delighted to say that we have sorted out some of our gremlins and we can recommence our conversation about the impact that Plan B and Omicron are having on the care sector. As you saw briefly earlier on, Joyce Pinfield, who is spokeswoman for the National Care Association, is with us and is reconnected, I hope, Joyce.
Yes, I hope I'm reconnected now.
Yeah, brilliant. And the last words I heard were how nice to see you and thank you so much. Lovely to see you. You confirmed that our introduction was broadly right, but what guidance, what support have you been given to bring these new restrictions into place?
Yes, well, of course, we've been working under restrictions on visiting since the beginning of the pandemic. Of course, to begin with, it was just purely window visits or non-contact visits. And then we did move to being allowed to have visitors within the care facility. Each care provider does have to take their own assessment and the risk and provide facilities to be able to carry out any visiting. So people have been coming in, visiting their loved ones with an LFT test that has to be negative, of course, with wearing full PPE and on an appointment system and in specified areas of the care home. We had been relaxed that we had been allowing visitors into special areas or indeed into residents' own rooms, which has been a great help over the last few months. But unfortunately, it's not anything where we would wish for. And we look like facing another Christmas with even more guidelines coming out due to the new variant. So now this new out due to the new variant last night, which is making care homes. So the staff will now have to do 3 LFT.
It's starting again, isn't it? No, it may be something between us and where Joyce is. I apologise, but it's not fair on her, nor is it fair on you for it to be dipping in and out. We'll go back to it only if we can and only if it's safe. I do apologise for that, but it's not worth missing an important conversation. But let me just remind you that what you did say, which is pretty impressive, is that they expected something similar to this would come in, and therefore they had plans in place so that they could organise it and they could make it quite smooth for those, although it was clearly a big disappointment, not only for the homes themselves, but much more importantly for the residents and for those who want to go and see their loved ones. So my apologies to you and indeed to Joyce that we weren't able to continue that conversation. Now, multiple sclerosis is a neurological condition which affects the nerves, causing a wide range of problems with vision, movement, sensation, and even balance. According to the MS Trust, almost 2,000 people living with the condition have struggled to access relevant care and support during the pandemic. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has been to Grimsby, speaking to a woman living with MS as well as a husband about the extra strain that lockdown has put on them.
Multiple sclerosis is a life-altering disease of the central nervous system, and more than 130,000 people in the UK, like Dawn, have MS. The mum of 4 was an outdoors adventurer who once loved skiing and horse riding, but she now struggles to do anything for herself after she was diagnosed with the condition in 1994 when she was just 32 years old. Dawn's cared for by her husband David, and both have felt the pressure of the pandemic.
It's not been easy, has it?
No.
No. We used to have 2 carers, and
I had to stop that.
Dawn got worse and needed really both of them at the same time, which we couldn't do, and so I had to sort of lay them off. So everything's been done by myself. We've kept ourselves to ourselves, and if we have to go out anywhere, it's all masks and
we don't
sanitise.
We've not had jabs. I'm allergic to the flu jab, and so I can't have jabs.
So we've had to keep ourselves pretty much everything online. You know, anybody does visit, it's, you know, they have to do tests first, and we do tests. We do the lateral flow test every 3 days, just to make sure we're safe. A lot of people thinking that it's not going to go away, is it? It's going to be like the flu, I think. Every year there's going to be a different strain of it from somewhere. So we've managed to live our lives this far safely, so we'll just keep going by the guidelines that are being given to us, and I think that's sort of the only way that we can keep going, because if it was to get that disease, you know, the weakness of the wife or whatever, you know, until that time start to think about what could happen.
Despite the many challenges she faces, Dawn still gets out and about with her hobbies, and in the face of adversity, the couple get by through taking one day at a time.
Well, it's frustrating more than anything, because you can't do anything to stop it, and you see it getting worse and worse and worse. I mean, the last 2 years it's really gone downhill, and you can't do anything to stop it. So that really does stab you, not being able to do that. We have to manage, don't we? I mean, I have to feed her everything now, and food has to be blitzed up because she chokes on it easily, and so that's a nightmare. just wanting to feed her. It's, you think, oh, is she going to choke on me this time? You know, it's fearful. But we get on with it, don't we?
There's not anything you can do about it. You just accept it.
You've always had a positive attitude towards it, haven't you?
You
never let anything stop you.
No.
Really. No.
Oh no. If I want to do something, I'll do it.
Even though the future is by no means certain for any of us in these COVID times, one thing that will never change is Dawn and David's love for one another, along with their positive outlook on life. Anna Riley for GB News.
Dawn and David, putting whatever minor problems many of us may or may not have in context. What remarkable people. Anna Riley, in lovely conversation with 2 people who really are wrestling with tough times, but with such a brilliant philosophy. We wish them well. Now, it's Christmas time and Panto is back. It is the season to be jolly. But of course, COVID is still here. Now, last year, with changing COVID restrictions, many people missed out on their Christmas Panto. This year, they are back with a bang in front of live audiences, so long as guidelines are followed. Now, when I read all about that, one man came to mind. Remember, this programme is called Alastair Stewart and Friends. He knows everything that there is to know about Panto. He was head of Tyne Tees Television when I first met him. He's now Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the Great University of Sunderland, but he's also written or co-written more than 40 pantomimes. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to my good friend, Graham Thompson. Graham! It really is a total joy to see you. But 18 steps back, not when you were running news and current affairs at Tyne Tees Television, when we were both mere striplings in this great industry of ours, but what drew you to pantomime as an art form?
Lovely to see you, Al. Well, I suppose it's because there is a lot of current affairs about pantomime when you think about it. Most pantomimes thrive on being topical. And I went to my first pantomime in the early 1960s in Newcastle. I loved it. I got involved in an amateur theatre company in South Shields where I lived, and they did brilliant pantomimes. I did plays actually with that company, but I never actually tread the boards as a panto performer. But I just loved the cleverness of the scripting. I loved the fact that you'll see several generations of one family. It's probably the only thing that, apart from maybe Disney on Ice, where you will get that kind of range of people going to the theatre. And of course, a good pantomime can turn children onto theatre at a very young age. And of course, a bad pantomime can turn them off. So I think it's a really important art form.
Intriguing, you making the point quite rightly about news and current affairs, and the greatest actors and actresses in panto will weave in little digs at Boris Johnson or little digs at the Labour, whatever it might be. But I was also thinking, knowing that you and I were going to have this conversation and our shared professional interests, and it just struck me that some of them are almost morality plays as well. I mean, Cinderella, there is a lot of morality in Cinderella, and even Dick Whittington, try again and try again.
Yes, and the villains are often at the end of the pantomime. There is a redemption. I mean, we're doing at the Customs House in South Shields this year, Rapunzel, and Mother Gothel, who kidnaps baby Rapunzel and uses her hair to revive her good looks and make her ageless. At the end, in our version at least, is reunited with Rapunzel because she's seen the error of her ways. And I think all good pantomime stories have that element of good triumphing over evil, and there is an element of redemption at the end of it. But along the way.
Yeah, I mean, you've written completely original works, and you've also written the Graham Thompson take on a particular story. Is it an art form where there's a central core of 7 or 8 pieces, and those are the ones that you modify, you amend, or is it an art form that's open to, hey, I've got a great idea for a brand new panto?
Both. It can be both. I think the secret of good pantomime is that people will recognise the tropes. They'll recognise the slapstick. They'll recognise the elements of romance. The love story. They'll warm to the comic. They'll boo and hiss the villain. There'll always be a takeoff scene where the audience can start shouting behind you. Good pantomime has got a lot of audience participation. So I think weaving all of those elements into an original script and an original take on a story, I think is one of the challenges and one of the delights of pantomime, as far as I'm concerned. And before the lockdown at the Customs House, we did Snow White, and we had this idea that could a complete stranger in the form of the prince revive Snow White with true love's kiss? And of course, actually, it's how can you say it's far-fetched when it's pantomime, but it felt a bit far-fetched to us. So we had Snow White's real mother imprisoned in the magic mirror by her sister, the Wicked Queen, and when the mirror smashes in Snow White, the sister is released, and she goes to save Snow White from the Wicked Queen. And when she's bitten the apple and she's in her sleep, true love's kiss actually comes from her real mother, who comes to save her. Now they still, she still marries the prince at the end, but there are ways in which you can play with the storyline.
That absolutely intriguing explanation. The other thing that strikes me, and you and I have talked about this before, and I know that you've done it, and you just mentioned one in passing there, big theatres, big community centres, virtually professional, with professional companies. But to you, the community setting, the village setting, is also crucially important. It's a binding thing for a group of people who share their lives 12 months of the year, but at Christmas time they can go that one step a little bit further and all join together for a sing-song and a bit of panto.
And that's exactly what's happening in my village in Yorkshire at the moment, that we're doing a version of A Christmas Carol, and there is a Christmas sing-along at the end. It's the first time the village hall has been used for performances in, 2 years since the last village pantomime. And you're absolutely right, there is an appetite for people to come back. We had a full house. Now, a full house in our village hall is 45 people, Al. So it's not huge. Whereas the pantomime that I'm doing at the moment in the Customs House in South Shields has got 400 seats. But that sense of community, the local references, seeing their village neighbours up on the stage, being Scrooge or the ghost of Christmas yet to come. It's a lovely, warm community feeling.
Absolutely. I said in the introduction that last year was a debacle. This year is considerably better. I mean, how has COVID impacted on your panto work?
Mixed picture. I mean, audiences are clearly delighted to be back in the theatre, to be able to enjoy pantomime. I think they've really missed it. There is, in the village at the moment, we encourage our audience to wear a mask. And of course, that is that follows the guidelines announced by the government earlier this week. It's the same in South Shields. For bigger venues, of course, they have to also show that they've either got a positive a negative result or a COVID passport. So I think there is nervousness out there. I think schools, for example, a lot of schools would normally, over the 5-week run of the Customs House theatre pantomime in South Shields, a lot of schools would come to morning performances, and I think there's been nervousness in schools about going out. So we've seen a big decrease in those numbers. But I was at a matinee of the South Shields pantomime on Thursday, and it was pretty full. And a lot of them were they wore masks on the way, and they kept their masks on during the show itself.
Final quick question. We've been chums for so long, and the last period of time has been mainly about the great University of Sunderland, where you work and hold high office. How's it doing? I mean, I know that COVID for all of our great educational institutions, from primary schools right through to great universities, has been tricky. Would you say the university's coped looking forward to 2022?
Absolutely. Our staff, our students have really risen to the challenge during the pandemic. Our medical school and our nursing school were working through the pandemic, and in fact, in 2020, in the April, we graduated our nursing cohort early in order for them to go onto the front line. So we have I think as an institution we've been in awe really of our staff and our students at the way they've carried on, and we had in-person graduations at the stadium over the summer, and it was wonderful to see those students who had managed to work throughout the most challenging of times, being able to walk onto that stage and be cheered on by their friends and family. It was a wonderful occasion.
I look forward to joining you there ere long. Stadium of Light graduation's one of the finest things ever. Between you and me, a real pleasure to talk to you, Graham. Between you, me and our audience, thank you very much indeed for your insights, and love to all in Sunderland and all in Yorkshire, and special love from me to the family as well. Good to see you. Graham Thompson, MBE, Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the Great University of Sunderland. And if you want to do media studies, consider Sunderland, because when you've got a guy who used to run news and current affairs in a genuine TV company, that's where you want to be. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. Lots more coming up on the show this afternoon. Busy day of sport. Man City versus Wolves, Chelsea versus Leeds, Arsenal versus Southampton, day 4 of the Ashes first test. Oh yes, and also Lewis Hamilton v Max Verstappen. But first, let's get a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, cloud and rain will continue to move eastwards across many parts of the country. Let's take a look at the details. In southwest England, you'll see a lot of cloud with outbreaks of rain, low cloud leading to hill and coastal fog as the day wears on, mild for the time of year. Cloud will continue to increase across southeast England, with a few spots of rain developing here and there. Chilly there with highs of 7 degrees. Moving on to Cardiff and South Wales, it'll be a wet afternoon with the rain turning heavy at times, especially over the higher ground. Breezy but mild for all. Across the Midlands and into the northwest England, outbreaks of rain will continue to move eastwards. The rain will be heavy at times and it will feel quite chilly, especially in the breeze. Over to northeast England and in Newcastle, the rain will be a little lighter and patchier in nature, perhaps with a few brighter spells developing from time to time.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Now, with the first test of the Ashes, Premier League football matches and a blockbusting Formula One finale tomorrow, there is a lot of really exciting sport to look forward to this weekend. And I'm delighted to be joined by sports journalist Ben Jacobs for a roundup of today's sport action. Ben, great to have you back on the show again, and always lovely to chat to you, particularly about football. I'm intrigued, as you know, about some of the personalities and things, and that makes the Aston Villa-Liverpool fixture a real standout in human and historic terms.
It really does. Steven Gerrard returning to the club where he made his name, having recently taken over at Aston Villa, and he's had a great impact. Gerrard is coming off the back of a 2-1 victory over Leicester City, and he'd done really well at Rangers too, which got him the job at Aston Villa in the first place. And I think when you talk about the human aspect of the storyline, there's a couple of points. First of all, Gerrard is an icon and will get a warm reception, but has to put all of that out of his mind once kickoff starts and make sure that he focuses on trying to basically annoy the fans that idolise him at Liverpool. And the second part of that is that Gerrard famously and unfortunately slipped against Chelsea, leading to a Demba Ba goal, which cost Liverpool a Premier League title. And as a manager, he's trying to almost avenge that and win the Premier League. And many people think, with all due respect to Aston Villa, that it's kind of a stepping stone in some respects. Gerrard would never say that and be so disrespectful to a big club like Aston Villa. But ultimately, if he does well at Aston Villa, where's his next job as a manager? It's at Liverpool. And could he one day win the Premier League as a manager with Liverpool? And there's all of those plot lines spinning around ahead of, as you say, an intriguing fixture on both a human and a football level.
Yeah, an absolutely intriguing segue, which I hadn't thought of until you said that, and certainly you and I hadn't discussed it, but it takes us to Manchester United, where there was a former superstar player who became manager and it ended in tears, up against Norwich City, who are also under new management. I mean, both have got real issues. Norwich just to survive and Manchester to regain former glory.
Yeah, Manchester United under Ralph Rangnick now following Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And it's a different approach, isn't it? Because as you say, Alastair, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was part of the Manchester United way. Manchester United love to appoint a legend that knows the club. Even Michael Carrick, who briefly took over from Solskjaer on an interim basis, was an ex-Manchester United player. But Rangnick's completely different in terms of his strategy, tactics, experience, and previously no connection with Manchester United either. And he got off to a good start, and Manchester United heavy favourites in this one to beat struggling Norwich, who are shipping goals left, right and centre. And it's going to be a big, big task if Norwich are to stay in the Premier League. Manchester United are stabilising. And it wouldn't at all surprise me if Ralph Rangnick, who's only there for 6 months, does well and ends up getting the job on a more permanent basis.
OK, we've got about a minute to go, so forgive me, I'm not going to ask about City. I'm going to change sport to the cricket, because the first test, the Ashes, I mean, it started pretty well as bad as it can with a duck for the opening batsman for England. And then it ends, as we heard on Bethany's News just a moment ago, they've been fined for a slow bowling rate as well, over rate. I mean, can it get worse? I suppose they lose the second test.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, England have got a dreadful record at the Gabba, and that showed there was a 162-run partnership between Root and Mallon that gave them a little bit of hope. But when they were bowled out for such a low total after day one, the writing was on the wall, and unfortunately, England's collapse after that 162-run partnership just emphasised how disjointed they were. The selection was off in many people's eyes too, and they need to bounce back now in Adelaide in an intriguing second test, which is a day-nighter with a pink ball. And I must just add as well, Alastair, I feel sorry for you because we've probably run out of time, but I feel like in this whole sports segment, the one thing you did want to talk about was the Formula One. So I am just going to finish by saying I think Hamilton will win in Abu Dhabi as well, just so we've covered all three sports, because I know you love your Formula One.
I'm just tempted to say, sorry, there was a break in the line. Who do you think's going to win?
I said Hamilton in Abu Dhabi. I think he'll win, unless they collide. If they collide and both go out, then
no. Enough of that. Enough. Ben Jacobs, total star, utterly brilliant. Thank you so much, as always. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. It's exactly 1 o'clock, and we have plenty more to come this afternoon. So do please stay with us. Hello and welcome back if you've been with me since midday, or hello and welcome if you've just joined us at 1 o'clock. I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'll be here for the next 2 hours, keeping you company with the stories that really matter across the country. And we've plenty still to come. I'll be carrying on with my big topic of the day, that's Plan B, and whether or not you will obey the new COVID restrictions this time round. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the news. Here's Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Alastair. This is your news at 1 o'clock. New allegations have emerged of COVID rules being broken following reports Treasury staff had office drinks during lockdown. The Treasury says it did not organise a party last year, but it's aware a number of people had impromptu drinks after working on the autumn spending review. It follows an investigation into several festive events in Downing Street in the run-up to last Christmas. Despite calls for the Prime Minister's resignation, he still has support within his party.
Went on to win a strong majority of the party membership, and then he led us to a victory with a big majority in Parliament. And I think you'll find the Prime Minister still has the confidence and support of the parliamentary party. There are clearly rows and disagreements going on about some of the policies and some of the actions, but that's quite normal in a lively government.
To think that there were parties going on. We don't need an investigation. We know there were parties going on. We know the dates that they happened in Downing Street. It's just sickening. And so I do think this is a matter of moral authority for the Prime Minister, and for the first time in his overprivileged life, he has to do the right thing. He has to understand the hurt, the anger that this has caused, and the damage that it's done to public health advice coming out of government.
Stricter COVID rules have come into force in Scotland. The government says all household contacts of positive cases should now isolate for 10 days, regardless of their vaccination status. That's as experts warn Omicron could become the dominant strain in the UK by next week. Health officials are urging all eligible people to get their booster jab, with new evidence showing a third dose significantly reduces symptomatic infection with the new variant. New guidance is also expected to be introduced for care homes from Wednesday. Residents will be restricted to 3 visitors and 1 essential care worker as part of measures to curb the spread of Omicron. Staff testing will also be increased from 2 lateral flow tests per week to 3, alongside a weekly PCR test. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 50 are dead in Kentucky, and a search and rescue operation is underway in southern Illinois after an Amazon warehouse collapsed. The Kentucky governor has declared a state of emergency, saying 4 tornadoes caused damage in over a dozen counties, one of them tracking more than 200 miles.
This has been one of the toughest nights in Kentucky history, and some areas have been hit in ways that are hard to put into words. To all of our Kentucky families that are impacted by this, we want you to know that we are here for you. We love you. We are praying for you.
The UK and Jersey governments have issued further licences to French fishing boats to trawl in British waters. 18 licences were granted to vessels that were able to show evidence of previously fishing in British grounds. 7 others are under consideration. It comes after an EU-imposed deadline to resolve the post-Brexit row over access rights passed without an agreement. Meanwhile, the UK has reached a deal with Norway and the EU over how to share fish stocks in the North Sea next year. The government says the catch levels are worth an estimated £190 million to the UK fishing industry, but catch sector bosses says it doesn't resolve the issues around access to Norwegian waters after talks between London and Oslo collapsed earlier this year. The Foreign Secretary has called for a united front against hostile behaviour by Russia. Liz Truss spoke during a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Liverpool. She also expressed deep concern about the amassing of troops near the Ukrainian border, warning Russia faces severe consequences if it invades its neighbour. And as you've been hearing, England have been fined their entire match fee and docked 5 ICC World Test Championship points for a slow over rate in the first Ashes Test. The side was ruled to be 5 short of the target overs. Australia beat England by 9 wickets in Brisbane. I'll be bringing you more headlines in half an hour. Now it's back to Alastair.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. I am Alastair Stewart, and until 3 o'clock I'll be keeping you company along with friends and, I hope, friendly guests. Still to come in around an hour, you'll be hearing my take on our main discussion today. Will I obey the COVID restrictions this time round? Also coming up, Transport for London's emergency funding deal with the government has been extended by 1 week. Our London reporter Alice will be at one of the local tube stations, bringing us right up to date. Plus, Christmas shoppers are falling victim to online fraudsters. 1 in 10 of us, in fact. So, how can we keep ourselves safe when buying those gifts for our loved ones online this Christmas? We'll be speaking to an expert who can answer that for us. Plus, lots more besides. GB News really is about you, our viewers. Any burning questions or stories that you think we need to cover, no matter how big or small they may appear, we want to hear them. Get your voice heard by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, and do please put Alastair Stewart in the subject line. Now, that rapid spread of Omicron coronavirus variant has led to the introduction of Plan B. Early analysis by the UK Health Security Agency showed a third vaccine dose prevents about 75% of people from getting any COVID symptoms. 2 jabs alone, probably not enough. Scientists are saying the variant's spreading so quickly that everyone is likely to come into contact with an infected person in the next few weeks. The government says, and I quote, "Urgent work's been ongoing to understand the impact of the new variant with regards to vaccines, treatments and transmissibility." So there's a lot of could, might and possibly in what officials are telling us. But Plan B, in truth, is a better safe than sorry move. So today I want to try and find out with a panel of experts from all sides of the argument. And I want to hear what you think. How worried are you? Are you persuaded by Plan B? In short, will you obey? And if not, why not? I'm delighted now to be joined by Christopher Hope, good friend of mine, assistant editor at The Telegraph and chief political correspondent. Very good to see you, sir, this afternoon. But just before we start, setting aside, as it were, your role as a political journalist, but as a husband and as a dad, what's your personal take on Omicron and Plan B?
Well, I think it's just, as you say, they're trying to get ahead of this, what may be a problem or may not be a problem. I mean, there are no confirmed Omicron cases, as far as I know, in NHS hospitals in England. None confirmed. No confirmed deaths, thank goodness. They're looking at South Africa. We don't know, can we compare the two cohorts of people? Is the vaccination rate the same way? We don't know. There's so many uncertainties here, but it's been what they announced last week has been a disaster for hospitality industries. There'll be parties shut down for next week. It's been really, really difficult. And I think they're so worried about what may happen, they may have overreacted. And that's what's really troubling as many as 60 to 80 Tory MPs, I think, might rebel on Tuesday when it's put to a vote in the House of Commons. And there's a big worry. And you're seeing in the papers today the stories about parties last year. Now the Treasury had a drinks party at their desks after the spending review. What's happened is the government has been so interventionist in our lives, Alastair, that they've turned journalists into kind of Cromwellian type figures trying to sniff out the booze and then put them in the paper. I mean, it's just like, what have we turned into is what I often think about the whole thing. Where have we gone? What happened to, where are we going with this? I mean, I can see why that Number 10 video is embarrassing for Allegra Stratton and other people in Number 10. They were mocking the rules almost, weren't they? But it's gone a bit extreme, I think, in this kind of trying to hunt out a party and make a big noise about it.
But intriguing. I didn't know that's what you were going to say, Christopher, but it takes me to my second question anyway. When I watched the Downing Street press conference on Wednesday, here comes Plan B, here's son of lockdown, here's masks back, here's impact, as you say quite rightly, on the hospitality sector and what have you. But all of the follow-up questions were about parties and gatherings and a year ago and refurbishment of the flat and what have you. And here's the question. You and I have been in this game for a long time. This is a significant moment when the public will not do what they're told to do because they don't trust the messenger.
That's the problem. So what's happened is that the message has been undermined by all these reports of parties last year, no, not this year, last year, and it is making it more difficult. We might see a kind of negative effect on the Tories next Thursday at the North Shropshire by-election. We'll wait and see on that. But yeah, there's no question it has damaged the messaging, if you can call it that dreadful term messaging. But it gets in the way of one rule. It looks like one rule for them and one rule for us. I mean, it's okay for us as members of the public to sort of mock a rule, which means you can't have a drink in a neighbour's sitting room, but you can outside over the fence at Christmas time last year, for example. But it's not right when you have the people who make the rules making a mockery of them. Many of us thought we were getting over Delta. Omicron is not yet known as a risk. There is drumming noise. There's a kind of drumbeat of concern, I think, about further lockdown measures next week after the votes on Wednesday. Let's hope nothing happens, but I'm worried.
Yeah. Let me bolt those 2 points together, because you rightly say the MPs start debating Plan B on Monday. There's a vote on Tuesday. Then on Thursday, there's the North Shropshire by-election. Let's just play war games. If he wins that Tuesday vote, even with Labour votes seeing him through or abstentions, and he wins North Shropshire, which has a majority that you don't count, you weigh it, and that's right down to a handful, is Boris Johnson in the clear?
It'll be one bound and he's free. I mean, he's clearly going to relaunch his administration in January with his interviews and probably on your show and elsewhere and speeches. The levelling up white paper is what he needs to get out the door properly. But by all accounts, the leaks sound very long term. The problem with Boris Johnson is we don't really know what Johnsonism is yet, and there's not much time to find out, because we are now, what I would argue, we could be in 2 years' time, we could be into a second administration of Johnson or the first of Keir Starmer, or the election will be in May 24. So we'll be in a cycle heading it into an election. There's no time really to prove to these red wall seats it was a good idea to vote Tory, because COVID has used so much bandwidth and time and effort to deal with in Whitehall. There's no way of Boris Johnson to stamp his authority. So I think he will fight the next election. I think all the talk about leadership is just irrelevant, noises off. He is an election winner, definitely. He is liked by a lot of people, definitely. He needs discipline. He needs an enforcer in number 10. I report in the Telegraph today how Eddie Lister, who I'm sure you know, Alastair, we used to work with him in City Hall and for a bit in number 10. He's offering to come back, or privately saying he'll come back to try and find an enforcer who can put a degree of discipline on the number 10 operation. David Canzini is named, quite a hard man, and a guy who's been around for 20 years and knows Boris well. He needs someone in there who can go in, a wise old head like you, Alastair, and say, Boris, change the record. This isn't working. If they'd owned up, for example, 10 days ago and said, when the Daily Mirror splashed its story about this number 10 party, yes, there was a party. It was by some junior people at number 10. There was no bosses there. Of course, we're going to talk to them about it. It was wildly inappropriate. It would be a one-day story. Instead, It's a 10-day story. By the time it's broken like a tsunami over the next restrictions, it's a disaster on public health grounds too.
Yeah. Absolutely intriguing, and I'm not sure I would do it, but that brilliant description just reminded me of the relationship between Bernard Ingham and Margaret Thatcher. I mean, she had lots of very brilliant advisors and what have you, but the person who really barked at her and she listened to was Bernard, the press secretary.
Yes. I would say, if I can say at 1 o'clock on Saturday, Boris Johnson needs a willy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which I will quickly add to people who do not know the gag. It's Willie Whitelaw, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, but only Margaret could say a Willie without blushing. Final very quick one, if I may, because I said earlier on in a different context, I read all of the newspapers, but I have favourite columnists, and one of them is the great Juliet Samuel, who works alongside you at the Telegraph, and Charles Moore also is there. Both are taking an intriguing theme, which is the government with no moral authority is a government that is in serious trouble. From Moore and Samuel, that's brutal.
It is brutal from those two, definitely. And certainly Charles Moore, who's a very old friend of Boris Johnson and used to employ him, of course, as a columnist in our newspaper, and is very close to Boris. So Boris Johnson will read that. Wherever he is in the UK, he will read today's Telegraph column. He'll particularly read and listen to what Charles Moore says, and that will worry him. The problem he's got is he's not really, I don't think, willing to own up to the mistakes he's made and the way they're so brought on himself. He can lead a chaotic life. All of our lives are chaotic. I'm sure yours is chaotic, Alistair. Mine certainly is. That's okay. But when that chaotic life and that way of working transmits itself onto a government on number 10, that's not good. And that's why he needs to bring people in to help him. Morality is an issue we might talk about in the confessional and not on 1 p.m. and GB News. But the point is to demonstrate a degree of respect for the office. I think that video that came out last week with Allegra Stratton in and all the mocking and teasing, it demonstrated a culture issue in Number 10. They've got to recognise there that it's a deep privilege to have power over our lives, a deep privilege, and that should be respected, and that must come from the top.
Christopher, great to talk to you. I hope you have a lovely Saturday afternoon. Thanks for your time.
And great to have you. Thanks for coming on. I love the show. Thank you.
Thank you, and love to the family. Take care.
Of course, all the best. Bye.
Christopher's got a brilliant, brilliant daughter who very nearly became a superb show jumper, but instead fell in love with ballet, at which she is also brilliant. So there we are. We hope to win her back to show jumping one day. The great Christopher Hope there, chief political correspondent and indeed assistant editor of the Daily Telegraph. I'm delighted to be continuing this conversation with another good friend of mine, Sir Bob Neill, who's the Conservative Member of Parliament for Bromley and Chislehurst. And there he sits. Really good of you to break into your Saturday afternoon to talk to us. I want to come to some of that political stuff that Christopher was talking about in a moment. But first, our theme is Omicron, it's Plan B, and whether folk out there will obey. How persuaded are you, Bob, of the threat of Omicron?
Well, it's very good to see you, Alistair. Always happy to break into the Saturday afternoon for you, and good to follow Chris, actually, as well. Look, clearly it is a threat, but I'm not persuaded that it necessarily justifies the level of draconian intervention that's being suggested at the moment. There are some sensible measures which I think we're being given on Tuesday, which I don't have a problem with. I don't have an issue with perhaps wearing masks more frequently. Chris and I were at the theatre watching HMS Pinafore at the English National Opera the other week. Happened to be there the same evening. The audience were all wearing masks. I don't have a problem with that. I don't mind rolling that out. But I do worry about things like what are, despite the semantics, vaccine passports. Because then if you're significantly interfering with the way in which people live their lives, I don't think you can do that on a maybe or what-if sort of basis. I think you need much stronger, much more compelling evidence for that sort of measure.
But you're being invited as a member of Parliament, as well as a citizen, and it's a serious distinction because you are very much both. You're being invited by the government's scientific advisors and medical advisors to do this. Whoever the messenger between them and you is, and it may be the Prime Minister, it may be Michael Gove, it may be Sajid Javid, don't you give them the benefit of the doubt, Bob?
Up to a point, but I think all experts, and when I was a barrister, Alastair, experts need to be challenged sometimes. And I think there's nothing wrong, therefore, with some robust challenge. I would have felt happier if we had waited, for example, to see the data which we're likely to have at the beginning of next week on where we go with hospitalisation. Because it's clear that Omicron is much more transmissible, and therefore we do have to be alert to that and take appropriate measures there. But as Sajid Javid, I think, rightly was saying, only at the beginning of the month, the real test is how sick does it make people, how much does it lead to hospitalisation and serious illness. And we don't have that data yet. My friend Greg Clark, the chair of the Common Science and Technology Committee, pointed that out only last week. So I can't help but feel that they have made their task harder by appearing to rush at the hurdles, if you like.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I said at the very beginning, it's a better safe than sorry policy, but there are too many ifs and maybes and perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
We've known each other a long time, and it's a blunt question, and you did listen to my conversation with Chris Hope. How troubled are you that a lack of trust in our leaders is tempting folk out there simply to say no?
I think it is a real risk. And I've just been looking at my emails over the last 2 or 3 days. And I think Chris has a very fair point. People do not like double standards. They will listen, but they expect also some seriousness of purpose, a sort of sense of the gravitas of being in charge of a nation's destiny. And I don't think we've seen that sufficiently in recent times. And I think they want to see a sense of discipline and a sense of coherence. Now, we don't, I think, have sufficient of that at the moment for reasons that I think Chris set out, of which I have much sympathy. And again, I think for that reason, we have a harder task. Again, it's not impossible, but we have a harder task in persuading people if they don't think those who make the regulations will take them seriously, or if they think that the timing of announcements are done really for sort of short-term political reasons rather than on both compelling evidence and then a serious analysis of the, if you like, the rule of law and liberty of the subject implications of taking such significant steps.
Final question. If you had to choose, and it's a grossly unfair question, but you have experience of me, so you will deal with it accordingly. Would you prefer that Boris Johnson stays where he is, but with a big hitter like Eddie Lister or somebody going in there, as Fraser Nelson put it, to rein him in and keep him on the spot? Or is it time for a fresh start at the leadership of your party, Bob?
Well, in the middle of a pandemic, the distraction of a leadership election is not, I think, a desirable thing. But I very much agree with the point that Chris made, and something I've said in other contexts in the past, that the Downing Street operation at the moment is not serving the Prime Minister adequately. I think Eddie Lister, who I knew very well, is exactly the sort of person that Boris needs, someone in that mould. I think the point you and I do remember Margaret Thatcher and Willie Whitelaw and Bernard Ingham, certainly. None of them would have stood for what's happened in the last week or so. And I think that will be the sort of discipline. And sometimes maybe saying to the Prime Minister, actually, jokes work for a bit, but sometimes fewer jokes, fewer words maybe, a little bit less florid flourish and a bit of straight talking, maybe exactly what people want at the present time. And actually people will listen better then. So sometimes Boris is a man of great talents, but he needs to be... he needs the slave behind him in the chariot more than most leaders. And as a classicist, I hope you'll get the point about that. And that's where you need the grey heads, if you like, rooted in the party, rooted in politics. And I think that will be the right route for him to go.
Bob Neal, always great to talk to you, a great barrister and a great political scientist as well. You take care and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you for breaking into it.
And you, Alastair, all the very best.
See you soon. Sir Bob Neal there, Conservative Member of Parliament for Bromley and Chislehurst. And intriguing as well, the chair of the Justice Select Committee and a practising barrister. Always worth talking to and always worth listening to. Now, you've heard what my guests have had to say about our big question today, from scientists to people who've got civil liberties doubts to senior journalists to just now a very, very senior Member of Parliament. Given what they are saying on this programme, will you be obeying the new COVID restrictions? Think about it, let me know. We've plenty more to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. After the break, our London reporter Alice Porter joins me, as promised, to tell us more about the drastic cuts which have been proposed to London's transport network. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, cloud and rain will continue to move eastwards across many parts of the country. Let's take a look at the details. In southwest England, you'll see a lot of cloud with outbreaks of rain. Low cloud leading to hill and coastal fog as the day wears on, mild for the time of year. Cloud will continue to increase across southeast England with a few spots of rain developing here and there. Chilly there with highs of 7 Celsius. Moving on to Cardiff and South Wales, it will be a wet afternoon to come with the rain turning heavy at times, especially over the higher ground. Breezy but mild for all. Across the Midlands and into the northwest, outbreaks of rain will continue to move eastwards. The rain will be heavy at times and it'll feel quite chilly, especially in the breeze. Over to the northeast and in Newcastle, the rain will be a little higher and patchier in nature. Perhaps a few bright spells developing from time to time. Chilly afternoon to come for many. Sunshine and showers for northern Scotland as the rain begins to clear here. Southern Scotland will remain cloudier with patchy rain continuing, turning milder from the west through the afternoon. And a dull, damp afternoon to come across Belfast and the rest of Northern Ireland. Patchy rain and drizzle in places with extensive hill fog. Mild and breezy with temperatures reaching around 12 Celsius. Through to the evening, the rain will continue its journey eastwards with clear skies moving to the northwest.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Transport for London's emergency funding deal with the government has been extended by 1 week as TfL faces a £1.9 billion budget black hole. The current financial deal was due to run out today, but negotiations have resulted in a short grace period. But is it enough to get TfL's finances back on track for the long time? Alice Thompson reports. Oh no, there she is. You're live. Goodness gracious me, and wrapped up against the cold. I thought it was a package. I do apologise. Good to see you. I saw you earlier on when I knew you were going out and about to do this. Remind us, first of all, why TfL is having this funding crisis.
Hi there. Yeah, I mean, really, it all goes back to the pandemic and lockdowns where people simply weren't taking the bus, they weren't taking the tube, and it means there's been a complete shortfall in the number of passengers and therefore the amount of money that TfL can get. So to put that into context, there's been a 90% fall in the fare revenue that they'd normally expect. So that's, of course, why TfL is now in this really, really difficult financial situation. Now, it's important to stress the government has bailed out TfL multiple times to the tune of £4 billion, but they say that money doesn't go far enough. They still say they need an extra 500 million to keep them afloat. And so it's a really difficult situation where we're sort of seeing what's happened during the pandemic, and the TfL are in a very precarious financial situation. And sadly, that's really a situation that's going to impact commuters, because Sadiq Khan has made quite a number of concerning, I think, warnings really about what could happen to transport in London if there isn't a government bailout secured.
Absolutely, but I wonder if TfL is like people have said in the past about the banks. I mean, in reality, it's simply too big to fail. Is this brinkmanship from the mayor?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because the government is obviously wanting TfL to be more, what they're saying, financially sustainable, and that's the sort of message that you're hearing from the government. I mean, I was speaking to the Department for Transport last night, and they're saying they're working closely with TfL to work in a way that they would be financially sustainable, and they say, quotes, in a way that is fair to taxpayers across the country. And I think that's the difficult situation the TfL sort of finds themselves in, and the government. How do you invest and make sure that TfL and London's economy, with transport being so much at the hub of it, how do you kind of keep that going in a way that's sort of fair to people in London, but also fair to people across the country? Because of course there may be people elsewhere who are sort of thinking, well, hang on a second, you've had £4 billion. Is it really fair for the government to continue pumping money into TfL?
Yeah. To personalise it, Alice, I came up from Waterloo to Paddington last night. And as you know, because you saw the photograph I took of the magnificent sunrise, which you also did somewhere else, I paid a little bit over £5 for Waterloo. I think it was about 8 or 9 stops to get to Paddington. If I'd gone by taxi, I know this because I've done it in the past when I had more cases and bags to carry, it's about 25 quid. I reckon my wallet could take another £1 on that rail fare on the tube, and I maybe have a comfortable financial situation. But yeah, a £5 for a journey of that length is cheap as chips.
Well, absolutely. I have to say that is a point I actually put to the Mayor last week when I was actually speaking to him on this very issue. I mean, of course, there are a number of options that the Mayor can explore, and he has been looking into them. Fares have gone up a little bit, but of course they could go up more. The congestion zone could be expanded. I mean, there is also discussion that he's sort of looking into about bringing in a sort of greater London boundary charge. This would make it about just over £5 if you lived in somewhere like Croydon, bringing your car into the city. But there's been a huge pushback on this from a lot of Conservative MPs because, of course, there is already the congestion charge zone cost of there. You've got ULEZ that came into effect just a couple of months ago. So if you have this as well, I think there's been quite a considerable pushback for many people who live in the greater sort of London area. So it's a really difficult one because what you're seeing is that there's a sort of tussle really between Westminster and City Hall, and sadly it's very much sort of commuters who've been sort of stuck in the middle of it in terms of where these costs are going to come from.
Yeah, and a final thought from you, as we've been talking about throughout the programme, Plan B. If folk are going to work from home in numbers, that's going to further dent TfL's cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, from Monday, that's when the government sort of advises for more people to work from home. And as you say, I mean, that could even do worse in terms of damaging the finances of already really very damaged TfL's sort of budgets. I mean, if we look now, currently, if we look at the peak times at which people are taking the tube, it's only half what it was pre-pandemic levels. So you've already got that shortfall. And then on top, and it's important to stress, things may never go back to pre-pandemic levels. And I think that's the real concern here, is that what happens if people continue the sort of hybrid working that we may see more and more, and we may never return back to pre-pandemic levels. So where does that leave the financial situation? Then, of course, there's been a number of strikes, unsurprisingly, partly in relation to some of the cuts that maybe happened to TfL. And of course, they won't be getting the revenue there if people can't be getting the tube. So I think we're looking at, sadly, it's good news, I think, that we've got this week, that there's been this extension to the deal. But my goodness me, we are still quite a long way from any long-term strategy and solution which will give some much needed calm to commuters around London.
Great to talk to you, Alice. Thank you very much indeed. The brilliant Alice Porter there with the latest on TfL, and now the brilliant Bethany with the very latest on the news desk.
I'm Bethany Elsey. Here are your latest headlines. New allegations have emerged of COVID rules being broken after reports Treasury staff had office drinks during lockdown. It follows a week of controversy surrounding parties in Downing Street in the run-up to last Christmas. The Treasury says it did not organise a party, but it's aware a number of people had impromptu drinks after working on the autumn spending review. Stricter COVID rules have come into force in Scotland. All household contacts of positive cases should now isolate for 10 days, regardless of their vaccination status. That's as experts warn Omicron could become the dominant strain in the UK by next week. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 50 people are feared dead in Kentucky, and a search and rescue operation is underway in southern Illinois after an Amazon warehouse collapsed. The UK and Jersey governments have issued further licences to French fishing boats to trawl in British waters. 18 licences were granted to vessels that were able to show evidence of previously fishing in British grounds. 7 others are currently under consideration. And England have been fined their entire match fee and docked 5 ICC World Test Championships points for a slow over rate in the first Ashes Test. The side was ruled to be 5 short of the target overs. Australia beat England by 9 wickets in Brisbane. You're right up to date. I'll have more in today's news in half an hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. When I said the tube fare from Waterloo to Paddington at a fiver was cheap as chips, I meant for me. I'm not suggesting that everybody can, oh, here's a fiver and what have you. So as I just said to somebody on Twitter, don't look for a fight where there isn't a fight. Online Christmas shopping, got that off my chest, is the done thing nowadays. But shoppers are being warned, and here's the really serious bit. Watch out for online purchase scams, as research now suggests that more than 1 in 10 people are victims of online fraud. Now, these scams occur when criminals try to tempt shoppers with heavily discounted prices, but the goods never arrive, or it's all a fake offer from start to finish. Fraudsters are also asking for a bank transfer rather than normal payment methods such as PayPal or bank cards where the bank gives you some guarantee, as well as cloning genuine websites. So it's a nightmare out there. Should online shopping platforms be doing more to protect customers at this time of year? And what are the advisory notes for you? There's few better people to guide on all of that than Tony Neate, former police officer and the founder of the online safety website Get Safe Online. I did not know how bad it was. I'd heard a little bit about tricky interest rates. I'd heard a little bit about phishing and scamming. It's a nightmare out there, Tony.
It can be, and you've got to make sure that you do your homework. The internet is a fantastic place. Millions of successful interactions and transactions every single day. But as you said, and to be honest, whether you need me on here, because I think you've explained it absolutely perfectly. You've got to be careful of these scams. You've got to take the necessary precautions to make sure. Let's be honest. You open up your present on Christmas Day. You want it to work. You want it to be genuine. And there's nothing worse than I've just bought a laptop for my granddaughter. And do you know, I paid a little bit extra and I went to the manufacturer's website to do it, just to make sure that I get a genuine product and it works on the day.
The other thing that terrified me, before we get to that point, and I totally agree, I want those Wellington boots and I want them to turn up in time, et cetera, et cetera. But one step back, I know I'm safe if I'm using somebody like Amazon, and I know I'm fairly safe if I'm using my credit card. But the amount of fraud that's been identified in this report, which is at the point of payment, what's the best advice to folk out there? Is there one singular system to use? And are there systems particularly to avoid?
There's a number of systems you can use. And the one that you need to avoid is direct payment via wire transfer. because you don't know where it's going, you can't trace it. Maybe the bank might be able to help you, but the chances are that won't be the case. If you're spending over £100, use a credit card. You've got lots of guarantees with a credit card. If the company goes bankrupt and doesn't send it to you, if it's not what you ordered, if it breaks down and you're having a problem. But one of the things to do is double check everything that you're doing. Now, don't just blindly put your money into it. Phone the company up. And if the company is genuine, you would hope that they've got a landline telephone number, address you can speak to. And I know you're going to say, well, Amazon, that's not easy to contact, but we know that they're there and who they are. So it's doing that little bit of homework, searching out when you find somewhere online, go onto the internet and have a look and see if anyone else has had dealings with that particular shop or organization and see if they're genuine. But don't use a wire transfer, use a credit card. You can also use some of the one particular or two particular banks that are now specifically online that gives you that protection. But check that out as well. Really, we don't want to have the problem of when we open it up on Christmas Day, it doesn't work. And that takes us to another point of making sure that the security is put on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, because that's the last thing you want to do. You want to play with your new laptop, your new game, whatever you've got, your phone. Make sure security's on it. I've seen over the last 15, 20 years that there's an awful lot of fraudulent scams that take place just after Christmas on that new device that isn't protected.
There's also the issue, and I know a number of MPs have raised this and are looking very closely at it, and that is you go online, you see something you really want, and truth to tell, it's a little bit more expensive than you can afford, but they offer you, oh yeah, here's a loan, buy now, pay later, and you then look in the microscopic print and you see 1,000% interest.
Absolutely. Don't fall for it. Read that small print. And it's easy for me to say that here, sitting there. When you're excited, you found the present you've been looking for. It's what seems to be an achievable amount of money because you can pay it. But look at that. That can bring an awful lot of pain and problems. And the £1,000 interest rate is out there. And we've all seen it and we've heard about it. It hasn't gone away. It's still there, and it's there to entice you to buy something that really, if we're honest, you can't afford.
We were talking last weekend about difficulties with some of the delivery companies, no name, no pack drill, but anyone who follows social media will have seen, stuff chucked over the wall or, oh, yes, we did deliver it, and no, they didn't. The thing that emerged from that, Tony, that really troubled us here on the programme was how difficult it is to take action against these people, short of ending up in the small claims court, and that takes a lot of time, and it takes a bit of money as well.
I've had exactly the same problem. I'm lucky, I'm a consumer as well. I ordered things that came in 2 parcels. The one parcel arrived, the big parcel, but the small parcel that had a battery in it didn't arrive. Now, I was very lucky. I dealt with a company that was well established, had lots of integrity, that believed me when we said it, and it was all sorted. But I had this dropping feeling in my stomach that, what's this going to take? Because the actual courier company said, we delivered it. Now, strangely enough, 5 days later, that parcel landed on my door because actually the logistics company did have it. But their first argument was, it's been delivered. It never had been delivered, but luckily the company I was dealing with understood and sent me out a new one. And then very nicely, they said I could keep the spare as well. So there's positive for paying that little bit extra and going to a genuine established company.
Final question, and it's to contextualise it, as it were. We've talked a lot on this programme about supply chain issues, and, everybody wants toy X or Wellington boots Y, but they're made in China or they're made wherever, and we know it's much more difficult. I mean, let's be honest, to underline your warnings, the temptations are all the greater when it's something you really want, but is in short supply.
GB News. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If everywhere you go, that electric computer, that games console is not available, and suddenly, and the other thing you'll see is if you go on auction sites, you'll see that it's being sold for twice the price. Suddenly, someone offers it to you out of the blue at a slightly cheaper rate. The alarm bells should start ringing. Don't do it. do what I've done on a number of Christmases. I've given a present, which is a photograph of what I am going to get straight after Christmas because it was undelivered. It's not perfect, but it's the way you can guarantee you're going to get it maybe a week, 2 weeks after Christmas.
Sage advice, as always. Tony, great to talk to you. Thanks for sharing some of your time with us this Saturday afternoon. You take care. And
great to be with you as well. Speak to you soon.
I hope so. That's Tony Neate, who's the CEO of the Get Safe Online group and also himself a former police officer. Always sage and balanced advice. Now, we were talking to a degree there about the economy in the context that the run-up to Christmas is a time when, in normal circumstances, we all spend, the sensible ones up to our limits, and the slightly less sensible ones sometimes go over and try and clear it come January, February, what have you. But COVID has caused problems across the piece. The gross domestic product growth figures, and that to be quite clear, I mean, GDP is simply a measure of everything that we produce, manufacture, all the services out there, how the economy is doing and expanding. Those figures were rather underwhelming this week. The UK economy grew by just 0.1% in October, with fewer people dining out and reductions in oil extraction and gas use meant that growth came in lower than expected. Now, despite that, there was a strong performance by the health sector, surprise, surprise, and the second-hand car business, which we've talked about on this programme. Now, although growth was stalling before the arrival of the Omicron variant, it has patently got a wee bit worse. And here we are sitting on the eve of Plan B. So let's get some more on this with Sam Collins, who's a senior advisor at the Institute of Economic Affairs, which does what it says on the tin. Let me start in optimistic mode, if I may. 0.1% in a month was lower than expected, but despite everything, it's still positive, it's still growth. We haven't stalled.
No, you're absolutely right. And to be fair to the government, actually, quite a lot of this would have been completely out of their control. So, for example, you mentioned the slowdown in oil extraction and similar. Some of that has a seasonal effect. And then I think you were talking with your last guest about the worldwide supply chain problems. That is completely out of the government's control. It massively slowed down manufacturing and construction. So, there is a lot of hope that things will improve, or at least would have done had we not been going into Plan B tomorrow.
Precisely so, which is entirely in the government's gift. I completely take your point that an awful lot of the other stuff is not in their gift at all. It happens, and great big ships getting stuck in the Suez Canal through to raw material shortages in China, all the rest of it. What's your assessment of Plan B? And it's a crucial question for the Institute of Economic Affairs because it clearly is at cabinet prime ministerial level a balance between the health risk and the economic risks.
I'm sorry, there's someone speaking over the recording. I couldn't hear most of that question.
OK, can you hear me now without interruption?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Brilliant. OK, no problem. I apologise for that. Let me repeat the question. I was agreeing with you that there's a lot of other things that are outside of the government control, but the introduction of Plan B from now and other bits of it next week is entirely in the government's gift. And it's a crucial balance between the health risks and the economic risks. So what's the Institute of Economic Affairs assessment of that decision to go Plan B?
And you're absolutely right. It's a huge problem. There's always going to be trade-offs between health and economics. The problem is with Plan B, people think that Plan B isn't going to cause significant economic impact because really the individual changes are quite small. You have to wear a mask in a few more circumstances. You have to have a vaccine passport to enter a nightclub. But there aren't sort of the big impacts like you got from lockdown. But the problem is that I think the Prime Minister talks a lot about, a small percentage of a large number can still be a large number. And that's what we're seeing with this, is that once you take a whole lot of very small changes to people's economic behaviour, it still builds up to a very large number. So at the Institute of Economic Affairs, we've estimated that the cost of Plan B is going to be something in the ballpark of £4 billion a month, harming to the economy, and could take 2% of GDP.
Fascinating. Final question, if I may. And the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who, when he commented on those growth figures, did say, look, hang on a minute, we've still got very high employment and the revenues flowing in from us poor taxpayers are still doing really well. So he's relatively optimistic. But it was crystal clear that he was itchy to do something, itchy to act if he could. And last weekend he was talking about tax cuts, which Labour, I read this morning, are in favour of as well. Is there anything that he can do right now to see us through and cheer us up? Because the mood that we're in has an economic impact as well.
Well, frankly, I mean, you're absolutely right. He should definitely be talking about tax cuts. He should also be talking about real impacts that they could have to help the business community, deregulation. The economy is suffering under, I think it's in the ballpark of £220 billion worth of regulations every year. That's another estimate from the Institute of Economic Affairs, by the way. And so there's a lot the government could be doing. We haven't done anything nearly enough to take advantage of the opportunities following Brexit. We've got so many things that we could be doing, so many of Brussels' anti-business bureaucracy that we could be rolling back. And yet every intervention seems to be for higher taxes, more spending, more regulation. Let's see the Chancellor announce some really radical free market reforms. That would really cheer me up at Christmas anyway.
I'll cheer me up as well, and I think it makes sound economic sense too. Sam, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us this Saturday afternoon, and my best to all at the Institute. See you very soon, I hope. Sam Collins, the senior advisor at the Institute of Economic Affairs, with his views on what the prospects are right now and what the Chancellor could do to cheer us all up and cheer the economy up. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and we've plenty more still to come this afternoon. It's been a busy week for the royal family, and I'll be chatting to a dear friend of mine, and indeed a friend of this show, Jenny Bond, on what the royals have been up to. So see you in just a couple of minutes.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, cloud and rain will continue to move eastwards across many parts of the country. Let's take a look at the details. In southwest England, you'll see a lot of cloud with outbreaks of rain. Low cloud leading to hill and coastal fog as the day wears on, mild for the time of year. Cloud will continue to increase across southeast England with a few spots of rain developing here and there, chilly there with highs of 7 Celsius. Moving on to Cardiff and South Wales, it will be a wet afternoon to come, with the rain turning heavy at times, especially over the higher ground. Breezy but mild for all. Across the Midlands and into the northwest, outbreaks of rain will continue to move eastwards. The rain will be heavy at times and it'll feel quite chilly, especially in the breeze. Over to the northeast and in Newcastle, the rain will be a little higher and patchier in nature. Perhaps a few bright spells developing from time to time. Chilly afternoon to come for many. Sunshine and showers for northern Scotland as the rain begins to clear here. Southern Scotland will remain cloudier with patchy rain continuing, turning milder from the west through the afternoon. And a dull, damp afternoon to come across Belfast and the rest of Northern Ireland. Patchy rain and drizzle in places with extensive hill fog. Mild and breezy with temperatures reaching around 12 Celsius. Through to the evening, the rain will continue its journey eastwards with clear skies moving to the northwest.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints, over a drink, we have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends on GB News. Now to some royal news, and there is plenty about this weekend, from royal vaccinations to visits to Wales. On Wednesday, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall urged those who are hesitant to get their COVID-19 jabs and boosters to do so. A busy week for Prince Charles as well, and there are rumblings that Her Majesty the Queen may miss her Christmas Day due to those stricter COVID rules. So lots on their agenda. Delighted to be joined now by a dear friend of mine and of this programme, royal commentator Jenny Bond, and there she is. How are you, my dear?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, great.
Excellent. Let's start with Her Majesty, because that's where we should always start when we're discussing royal matters. I mean, almost mixed emotions, Jenny, because there are reports this morning that the Christmas party and the gathering can still go ahead, but she may not be able to go to church, which you know better than anybody else, to her is really important.
Yes, I must say, we don't know what's going to happen. I think, like everyone else, she's weighing up the pros and cons. The risks to someone of her age mixing over the festive period are obviously greater than for anyone else. But it's a very tiny church, you know, St Mary Magdalene, and largely it will be her family who would be there with her at the church service, as they always are on Christmas morning. And since she's spending Christmas with them in Sandringham House itself, I don't quite see the logic of not going to church. It could be that she might feel it would send the wrong message. It would encourage quite a large gathering outside that church. And even though it's in the open air, maybe that's not what she feels people should be doing. I think at the moment they're weighing up the risks.
The family gathering, I presume, you will know, purely traditional things. I mean, is it party games and things that you blow and stream? What do they actually do?
Well, yeah, I think they probably do play some quite silly games. Silliness is very much a part of the Royal Christmas. They celebrate it rather untraditionally, I suppose, in that they give their gifts out on Christmas Eve, and they have long trestle tables all set out for each person. But the rule is that you must give someone something totally useless, really, something funny. And that's what they do. And then they go to church and they have Christmas lunch and spend Christmas Day together, and gather, of course, to watch the Queen's Christmas message at 3:00. So broadly very traditional. But yes, silliness does come into it.
One thing that is definitely not silly, which I read, and I don't know whether it's true or not, and you can give me a steer on this. One gathers that members of the palace staff, the courtiers, were pretty honked off about Downing Street having had a Christmas party last year when their own celebrations, last year I underline, were disrupted. Any truth in that?
Well, I think it would be only human for them to feel exactly those emotions. I think, again, it's what we're all feeling, that those who set the rules maybe should abide by them rather than making us do one thing and they do another. So, yes, I think probably they were annoyed. And they, again, they have to be extremely careful about how they conduct themselves in this season. The royals are, we look to them for an example. And I think that will be uppermost in the Queen's mind as to just what they do this Christmas.
Indeed. And final quick one as we go up toward the top of the hour. I mean, in terms of example, Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall could not be clearer. Get those booster jabs.
An important message on the first anniversary of the first vaccination, and all the more important, I think, that they're using their platform to do that when we know that the Prince of Wales has long been a fan of alternative medicine and homeopathy. But now he's saying you must get your jabs and get your boosters. OK. I've just been told in my ear we've got 10 seconds. I think it's a lovely picture. Do you? Oh, it is a lovely picture, yes. They always bring out a mean Christmas card, the Prince William and his family. It's lovely, isn't it?
Great stuff. Jenny, lovely to see you. Thank you so much. Ed, Jenny Bond there at 3 seconds past 2. I nearly got away with it, but it was a close run thing. It is just after 1 o'clock, but a mere matter of seconds. And you're watching Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. And we've lots more conversation and guests still to come. So do please stay with us. It's not 1 o'clock at all. It's 2 o'clock. What am I talking about? Welcome back. It's Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. I'll be with you for the next hour, keeping you company with the stories that matter all over the country. We've plenty more coming up on the COVID story that we've been covering, my take, your take, and I've just been handed some of your emails. Wow, it's almost sitting here smouldering. But first, Bethany's news to bring you right up to date.
Thanks, Alastair. This is your news at 2 o'clock. New allegations have emerged of COVID rules being broken following reports Treasury staff had office drinks during lockdown. The Treasury says it did not organise a party last year, but it's aware a number of people had impromptu drinks after working on the autumn spending review. It follows an investigation into several festive events in Downing Street in the run-up to last Christmas. Despite calls for the Prime Minister's resignation, he still has support within his party.
He went on to win a strong majority of the party membership, and then he led us to a victory with a big majority in Parliament. And I think you'll find the Prime Minister still has the confidence and support of the parliamentary party. There are clearly rows and disagreements going on about some of the policies and some of the actions, but that's quite normal in a lively government.
To think that there were parties going on. We don't need an investigation. We know there were parties going on. We know the dates that they happened in Downing Street. It's just sickening. And so I do think this is a matter of moral authority for the Prime Minister, and for the first time in his overprivileged life, he has to do the right thing. He has to understand the hurt, the anger that this has caused, and the damage that it's done to public health advice coming out of government.
Stricter COVID rules have come into force in Scotland. The government say all household contacts of positive cases should now isolate for 10 days, regardless of their vaccination status. That's as experts warn Omicron could become the dominant strain in the UK by next week. Health officials are urging all eligible people to get their booster jab, with new evidence showing a third dose significantly reduces symptomatic infection with the new variant. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 50 are feared dead in Kentucky, and a search and rescue operation is underway in southern Illinois after an Amazon warehouse collapsed. The Kentucky governor has declared a state of emergency, saying 4 tornadoes caused damage in a dozen counties, one of them tracking more than 200 miles.
This has been one of the toughest nights in Kentucky history, and some areas have been hit in ways that are hard to put into words. To all of our Kentucky families that are impacted by this, we want you to know that we are here for you. We love you. We are praying for you.
The UK and Jersey governments have issued further licences to French fishing boats to trawl in British waters. 18 licences were granted to vessels that were able to show evidence of previously fishing in British grounds. 7 others are under consideration. It comes after an EU-imposed deadline to resolve the post-Brexit row over access rights passed without an agreement. Meanwhile, the UK has reached a deal with Norway and the EU over how to share fish stocks in the North Sea next year. The government says the catch levels are worth an estimated £190 million to the UK fishing industry, but catch sector bosses say it doesn't resolve the issue around access to Norwegian waters. That's after talks between London and Oslo collapsed earlier this year. The Foreign Secretary has called for a united front against hostile countries. Liz Truss spoke during a G7 meeting of foreign ministers in Liverpool. She also expressed deep concern about the amassing of Russian troops near the Ukrainian border, warning Russia faces severe consequences if it invades its neighbour.
We need to show a positive, proactive approach in making ourselves safer, more competitive, and better able to stand up for the values we believe in. We need to defend ourselves against the growing threats from hostile actors, and we need to come together strongly to stand up to aggressors who are seeking to limit the bounds of freedom and democracy.
And England have been fined their entire match fee and docked 5 ICC World Test Championship points for a slow over rate in the first Ashes Test. The side was ruled to be 5 short of the target overs. Australia beat England by 9 wickets in Brisbane. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now it's back to Alastair.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. I am Alastair Stewart, and for the next hour, I'll be keeping you company along with friends and friendly guests. Still to come, in just a moment, you will be hearing my take on our top story today. Will you be obeying the COVID restrictions this time round? But before that, I will also be sharing back with you what you think about the matter. Also, dog owners could be made to undergo compulsory training to prevent attacks, as a new government commission report concluded that it's the owners and not the breeds that are to blame. Is there really such a thing as a bad dog, or are they just bad owners? Another hit for the hospitality industry. Some small restaurants are having to pay chefs £1,000 sign-on fees. GB News is all about you, our viewers. Any burning question or stories that you think we need to cover, no matter how big or small it may seem, we do genuinely want to hear them. So get your voice heard by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk. And do please put Alastair Stewart in the subject line. Now, before you hear my view on this and listen to what some of you have been saying about it, I'm delighted to be joined by the former Health Secretary and good friend of this programme, Stephen Dorrell. Stephen, always a pleasure to see you. As a former Health Secretary, how worried are you about Omicron?
The answer is increasingly worried. I think the evidence is that, it's clearly spreading very quickly, first obvious point. Second point is that the vaccination program and the booster program do provide a very substantial protection, but the key seems to be the booster jab, and we've been relatively slow at getting the booster jab rolled out, and I think it's now essential that there's a real focus on getting boosters into as many arms as possible, because it's the old thing with COVID, that the point of real concern is the impact of cases on NHS emergency departments, A&E departments, but also emergency beds in hospital. And I become increasingly concerned on the evidence that we're seeing that this is going to be a difficult period during January, February and March. And there is a requirement, it seems to me, for more action to be taken to prevent the spread of this infection and therefore the load on the NHS.
We capture that extra action that you, Stephen Dorrell, would be putting into place were you still occupying the office of the Secretary of State for Health?
We've seen advice being given to ministers. They've been sometimes slow to take it, but I think I'm pleased that we're personally it's inconvenient to me as it is to everyone else, but I do think it's right for the government to be saying that we should now be going back to working from home where that's possible. And sad to say, I mean, I was engaged in a conversation earlier this morning, members of my family, about a social event this coming week that we've decided should not go ahead. Because it would take place in a pub, and we were concerned that 2 members of my family who are particularly vulnerable wouldn't be sensible for them to be in that kind of place.
That's the sensible thing to do in those circumstances, Stephen. But the reason we asked about will you obey is because although the polls, there's a big poll in the Mail this morning that shows around about 30% of people are definitely absolutely up for tougher measures, masks, staying, working at home, the rest of it, sometimes getting up as far as 50%. There is growing evidence that there is a significant number of people out there who won't do what they may see as being the right thing because it's Boris Johnson and this government that are telling them to do it because of the damage to his trust factor. How worrying is that for you?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, at least 9 is the answer. You know, Alastair, I made my own personal decision about Boris Johnson and his Tory party some years ago now. I think that the British public have been extremely tolerant of measures that were necessary to control the growth of the virus, the spread of the virus, the impact on the health service, the impact on the community as a whole. And it's a matter of profound regret to me that sense of duty, old-fashioned word, sense of duty that is very widespread in our community isn't shared by the people who are supposed to represent us.
Bob Neill, who you will remember well, who is still in the House and representing Bromley as a Conservative, but also Christopher Hope, who I know you know as a senior and respected political journalist, both said this, that of Boris Johnson, he needs to rein it all in a bit. He needs to have a big hitter in there keeping an eye on him, and then it will be OK. If that isn't done, it won't be OK. I know your position, but do you have any sympathy with them giving that prescription, as it were, for a retrievable situation, or is it lost?
Well, my own position, it's quite difficult to disentangle my own position from what the view I would take if I were still a Conservative Member of Parliament. But is it not absurd, Alastair, that what those Christopher and Bob are both saying apparently is that we need to have a minder to look after the Prime Minister? What kind of a structure is that?
Perfect, crisp and succinct answer. Thanks for your thoughts on, right at the top there, about Omicron, increasingly concerned about it, and that Plan B, in your judgment, is the right thing to do, as well as get those booster jabs in. Stephen, great to see you, as always, and thank you for sparing some of your time this afternoon with us. I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Sorry about the family gathering, but I can tell you, I know exactly where you're coming from. My daughter even messaged, and it was last night, to say, should I still come home for the weekend or not? We're lucky enough to live on a farm, as you know, so she's there. But these are real problems up and down the country for all sorts of folk. I hope, nevertheless, you have a great Christmas. Stephen Dorrell there, giving his views as a former health secretary and someone who, as he made clear, has now distanced himself from the Conservative Party, but is still totally qualified, in my view, to give a view on these matters. Talking of which, before we get your views on these matters, and indeed mine, let me just give you a reminder what some of my guests have had to say about this new COVID restriction. And I think it really was a terrific lineup of people. And I went for balance, and I hope you will agree with me that we achieved it. Kicking off was Sir Andrew McMichael, Professor of Immunology at the University of Oxford. And he told me how herd immunity, I'm afraid, isn't enough.
I think herd immunity might come later when more and more people have been infected. I mean, if it's going to be doubling every couple of days, that's a millionfold in 6 weeks. So there will be a lot of people infected, I think, by February. And then you may get some degree of herd immunity together with the vaccine protection, which will be increased by people having booster doses. But I think we have to think very carefully about whether, if this thing is going to be with us forever, which is quite likely, how many deaths a day do we accept? 200 a day, which is what it was very recently. That's 1,000, more than 1,000 a week. It's 2 jumbo jets crashing every week. I mean, we can't really accept that. We might accept something a bit less, but not that level.
Sir Andrew McMichael of Oxford University. I then spoke to the co-founder of the Together Declaration, Alan Miller, and I asked him if he thought Omicron posed a real and tangible threat.
I think that what we have to do is everyone keeps saying, look at the science, look at the data, look at the evidence. And what we know from South Africa is that whilst it spreads very fast, rapidly, they're mild symptoms. All the doctors that have assessed it and evaluated it and brought it to our attention. I think it also needs to be noted that when figures like Sir Andrew McMichael put out, we have over 400 deaths of cancer a day. We now got a backlog at the NHS of millions of people waiting because of lockdowns and restrictions. And we should be doing what Chris Whitty said, which is like living with this with a flu now. The consequences for restrictions are very damaging. On the one hand, economically, which also has an impact on the NHS and everything else, but also obviously for our civil liberties and our rights. The idea that we impose restrictions that make no sense, vaccine passports, when we know that transmissions occur, we're just being told that, 2 vaccines may not protect you, a third might or might not. We now have more boosters than the 15 million jabs to freedom. What we know about transmissibility is that as new variants come around, which they always do, that they become less damaging. And we've seen that. Obviously, originally the discussion was to protect the NHS. There's about 5% of people in hospital beds with COVID. And I think that's in the context also of many, many beds that have been cut and spaces that are larger to deal with COVID. So we've got this overall context, but the when in doubt, regulate and restrict is an enormously damaging.
Alan Miller, absolutely intriguing analysis there. So we have Sir Andrew McMichael with his view and then Alan with his view. Both clearly in conflict, but both totally lucid. Talking of lucidity, I was also delighted to be able to turn to the assistant editor of the Daily Telegraph, their chief political correspondent, an old mate of mine, Christopher Hope. He told me how the public won't take Plan B as seriously as they ought, perhaps, after the Downing Street party allegations from last year.
That's the problem. So what's happened is that the message has been undermined by all these reports of parties last year. No, not this year, last year. And it is making it more difficult. We might see a kind of negative effect on the Tories next Thursday at the North Shropshire by-election. We'll wait and see on that. But yeah, there's no question it has damaged the messaging, if you can call it that dreadful term, messaging. But it gets in the way of one rule. It looks like one rule for them and one rule for us. I mean, it's okay for us as members of the public to sort of mock a rule, which means you can't have a drink in the neighbour's sitting room, but you can outside over the fence at Christmas time last year, for example. But it's not right when you have the people who make the rules making a mockery of them. Many of us thought we were getting over Delta. Omicron is not yet known as a risk. There is drumming noise. There's a kind of drumbeat of concern, I think, about further lockdown measures next week after the votes on Wednesday. Let's hope nothing happens, but I'm worried.
Goodness me, that's Christopher Hope from the Telegraph. Now, nodding to difficulties as I have throughout the programme about whether Plan B is right or wrong. The messenger is absolutely crucial. So in the last hour, I was delighted to be able to speak to Conservative Member of Parliament, Sir Bob Neill, and I asked him if it was time for some fresh leadership in his party.
Well, in the middle of a pandemic, the distraction of a leadership election is not, I think, a desirable thing. But I very much agree with the point that Chris made, and something I've said in other contexts in the past, that the Downing Street operation at the moment is not serving the Prime Minister adequately. I think Eddie Lister, who I knew very well, is exactly the sort of person that Boris needs, someone in that mould. I think the point you and I do remember Margaret Thatcher and Willie Whitelaw and Bernard Ingham, certainly. None of them would have stood for what's happened in the last week or so. And I think that will be the sort of discipline. And sometimes maybe saying to the Prime Minister, actually, jokes work for a bit, but sometimes fewer jokes, fewer words maybe, a little bit less florid flourish and a bit of straight talking, maybe exactly what people want at the present time. And actually people will listen better then. So sometimes Boris is a man of great talents, but he needs the slave behind him in the chariot more than most leaders. And as a classicist, I hope you'll get the point about that. That's where you need the grey heads, if you like, rooted in the party, rooted in politics. And I think that will be the right route for him to go.
Sir Bob Neill, Chair of the Justice Select Committee and Member of Parliament for Bromley and Chislehurst. Now, it's your turn, which is always one of my favourite bits of the whole programme, because you never hold back. Rory, who, to be fair, is a friend of mine as well, and has actually been on the programme, but he took time to tweet in this. The evidence from South Africa and elsewhere is that this is a highly transmissible but mild variant. Doctors, epidemiologists and the World Health Organization all say the same thing. It's mild and special measures are not needed. Even better, it stimulates broad-spectrum immunity. Plan B, he says, is reprehensible. Jeff emailed, Alastair, COVID's not going away. We cannot spend the rest of our lives being put under government rules. I think we should all be responsible for our own actions. We also need some clarity on deaths. We don't want to know how many people died who had COVID. We need to know what they died from. How many had heart problems? How many had cancer? How many had pneumonia? How many people had flu? Gordon sent an email as well. The government has lost my trust. The hypocrisy has now reached new levels. No talk of the damage that the Plan B measures cause, only more fear-mongering. We are being asked to give up freedoms, but the anecdotal evidence suggests symptoms are very mild, like a cold. No confirmed deaths from this Omicron variant. As for passports and mandatory vaccinations, no, I will not comply. People need to take control of their own lives and assess their own risks. In the UK, we are slow to anger, but we have reached a tipping point. The only thing I would say, and add to that, Gordon, is what Sir Andrew McMichael said about cases, because I did make that point myself, that there haven't been fatalities and there haven't been hospitalisations yet. He did say it may take 2 or 3 weeks before that kicks in. So I'm not contradicting you. I'm just adding what one of my eminent guests had to say about it. Sandra, email. I've asked this question several times, including directly of supermarkets. With all the fuss about mandatory wearing of masks, why is it OK for people to simply say they are exempt from wearing a mask and then be allowed to enter supermarkets without wearing a mask? Why do supermarkets allow staff to work on the shop floor face-to-face with customers without wearing a mask? None of this makes sense. Thank you, Sandra. Eddie, also via email. What is the point of getting information from South Africa, which, by the way, have very few people vaccinated and have been living with the variant for longer than the UK? The outcome from South Africa is that the virus is mild, so why should we be saying that until the UK has had the virus for 4 weeks, we should be cautious? The UK is covered by the vaccination to a far higher level, and the scientists are showing no faith in this vaccination. I have many, many more, but I'm being told very authoritatively in my ear, you've run out of time. But thank you all for sending those in and for taking to social media to share them there as well. I really do genuinely appreciate it. And I think it did show that it was an important and timely debate. So let me add my 2 penneth. I do genuinely think we've had a wise and wide discussion about Omicron, Plan B, and the willingness of people to obey. What we've really tried to do here at GB News is to give airtime to those who believe we should follow the instructions for our safety and for that of our fellow citizens, to protect the health service and to see off this health challenge after nearly 2 years. But we have also consciously tried to give time to those who want to be free, to do their own thing, to those who are concerned but don't think Plan B is the way forward, and to those whose greatest disquiet is, of course, with the government and its bruised authority to tell us what to do about anything. But in my view, there are 2 distinct issues here: the risk to health and the authority of the government. And it is very dangerous to muddle the 2. On the risk to health, I'm pretty clear. You may not like it, but here it goes. If the chief scientific advisor and the chief medical advisor both say that Plan B is, albeit a better safe than sorry code to follow, I'll follow it. As you know, if you've watched this programme before, I have been jabbed and boosted, and I've also tried to follow, to the best of my ability, all the hygiene and distancing strictures. And so far, so good. However, I would like greater clarity and transparency from the boffins who I am willing to follow. I'd like less could, might, perhaps, and more thus, therefore, and must. If your GP gives you a prescription, they don't say, this might be the right drug, or take the pills if you fancy it. On the authority of the government, separate issue. To tell us what to do, that is the question. They are their own worst enemies. Such is the scale of their obfuscation, contradictions, and even deceit, it's made it difficult for good, law-abiding citizens to believe them when they tell us what to do. I think disobedience on that basis is unwise, but be clear, it is understandable. They've brought it upon themselves. I really don't think that folk should refuse to obey, but I certainly understand their logic, so not sympathise, but perhaps empathise. I just think it leads you to the wrong conclusion. It's as simple as that. It's a bit like cutting off your nose to spite your face in a way. I showed 'em, he or she uttered from their hospital bed. It's not exactly my idea of a triumph. When I made similar points in my 8 o'clock programme last night, I got a lot of flack from you on social media. So let me be clear about it. I am not being anti-Boris or anti-anyone. To me, however, it is about leadership and authority. I was also accused of just being a part of the same old mainstream media. Believe me, I'm really not. But I do think the tough questions need to be asked about the science and medicine just as much about last year's parties, cover-ups and denials. And I intend to continue doing just that. This pandemic is about the health risks that we face and the risks to our economy and to our society. It all matters. So let's keep healthy and let's keep a weather eye on what the government are up to and why. I don't think Plan B was a distraction, but the recent behaviour of ministers and some of their advisers allowed that to appear as a serious explanation for the unveiling of Plan B on Wednesday. That much is crazy, but that is where we are. Lots more to come this afternoon on Alastair Stewart and Friends. Should it be mandatory for a dog owner to have training lessons before owning a furry friend? We'll be discussing that next, but first, let's bring up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather damp and cloudy as rain continues to spread eastwards across the UK. The southwest will remain rather cloudy and damp too, with some mist and fog developing across the hills. It'll be feeling mild though, with temperatures remaining in double figures. Moving east, it will be a wet evening across southeast England and East Anglia, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle moving eastwards. After a brief drier interlude, the rain will return across Wales and will turn heavy at times across higher ground, mild with temperatures staying in double figures. Moving on to the Midlands and northwest England, there you will also have a cloudy and damp evening with the heaviest rain across the Pennines. After a cold afternoon, temperatures will be on the rise as the mild air moves in. Northeast England will start the evening on a cold and cloudy note with some patchy rain in places. Temperatures, however, will begin to climb, reaching high single figures throughout the evening. Moving up to Scotland, and it'll be rather cloudy and damp in the south. However, further north, we'll see a mix of clear spells and showers, but feeling chilly here. Northern Ireland will become drier this evening as some clearer skies move in, especially out towards the west of the country. It'll be mild initially, but turning cooler later on. And overnight, it'll remain cloudy and damp for many, but increasingly mild, with the exception of northwestern parts of the country.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News. Into the last lap now. I'm with you right up until 3 o'clock. Dog owners may be made to undergo compulsory training to prevent attacks, as a new government commission report concluded that owners, not breeds, are more often than not to blame. And this could mean that it will no longer be illegal to own breeds such as pit bulls. Government spokesman confirmed that ministers were, and I quote, carefully considering the recommendations of the report, which would rip up the 1991 Dangerous Dogs Act and shift the focus of responsibility to the owners. I'm delighted to be joined now by dog trainer and behaviourist Carolyn Menteith. Carolyn, I cheered when I read this report in the Telegraph this morning because I can remember the Dangerous Dogs Act coming in and Ken Baker and it being a classic case of a knee-jerk reaction, a bad bit of legislation to deal with what we both would agree, though, is, however, a challenge. Are they inching towards getting it right this time?
I think there is no doubt that the Dangerous Dogs Act hasn't worked. As you said, it was knee-jerk legislation brought in following some really serious dog attacks in South London. And yes, something needed to be done. But the Dangerous Dogs Act, from the breed-specific legislation point of view, hasn't worked. We still have dog attacks, although we do need to put this into perspective a little bit. There are 12 million dogs in the UK, and very few of those go on to attack or to cause serious injury. And they do make the news because they're news. I mean, if we talked about every time a car accident caused serious injury, we wouldn't talk about anything else. And so these dog attacks make the news because they are unusual. We've got 12 million dogs out there in the UK, and most of them are model canine citizens. But then one serious dog attack is a serious dog attack too far. So something does have to be done about it. And you are absolutely right. It is owners. But it's not always that owners are irresponsible. It's quite often most owners don't want to have a problem dog, a dog that attacks, a dog that bites. They just don't necessarily know where to go for help. And COVID has given us the perfect storm for that, because all the puppy socialization classes, the training classes, even access, face-to-face access to vets has been prevented near enough for the last 2 years.
Sure.
We've gone from having 9 million dogs in the UK to 12 million dogs in the UK since the first lockdown, and most of those are inexperienced dog owners because their working lifestyles have never let them have dogs before.
Carolyn, is it, I mean, I don't want to speak against your business because obviously it's what you do. I know you're a behaviourist and you're a trainer, what have you. But there are elements of it which you can very easily train yourself to do. Go online, read the good books, read your articles, what have you. It doesn't have to cost a fortune, but it can avoid real tragedy.
One of the problems that we have is we're an unregulated industry. And the other problem we have is if you go on the internet, you can find bad information as well as you can find good information. Yeah. And so I think one of the things we need to do is we need to have a regulated profession that's accountable so the public know who they can go to trust. And that's something that I'm working for. I chair the UK Dog Behaviour and Training Charter Group, which is 9 organisations working together. There's another umbrella organisation, the Animal Behaviour and Training Council, and we're starting to come together as an industry. I don't think mandatory dog training classes are the way forward, but I think there should be pre-puppy classes in the way that there are prenatal classes. People aren't necessarily know what having a baby means and how to be a parent, in the same way that people don't always know what having a dog means and how to be I hate to say dog parent, but a responsible dog owner. And so I would like really, really clear access to that. The problem is it costs money, and who's going to do it?
Sure. All right, Carolyn, a real pleasure to talk to you about it. Sage advice there. Watch this space. It is a report, but we'll watch the action. That's Carolyn Menteith there, dog trainer and behaviourist, reacting to the report from Middlesex University, commissioned by the government, and the government saying they are looking very closely at it. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends. Plenty more still to come this afternoon in the remaining 25 minutes, including the battle for the hospitality industry continuing as they brace for yet another tough Christmas. We'll be speaking to some of them on the ground next. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the news. Here's Bethany.
Thanks, Alastair. I'm Bethany Elsie. These are your latest headlines. New allegations have emerged of COVID rules being broken after reports Treasury staff had office drinks during lockdown. It follows a week of controversy surrounding parties in Downing Street in the run-up to last Christmas. The Treasury says it did not organise a party, but it's aware a number of people had impromptu drinks after working on the autumn spending review. Stricter COVID rules have come into force in Scotland. All household contacts of positive cases should now isolate for 10 days, regardless of their vaccination status. That's as experts warn Omicron could become the dominant strain in the UK by next week. In the US, dozens of people have been killed by tornadoes which swept through the Midwest and parts of the South. At least 50 people are feared dead in Kentucky, and a search and rescue operation is underway in southern Illinois after an Amazon warehouse collapsed. The UK and Jersey governments have issued further licences to French fishing boats to trawl in British waters. 18 licences were granted to vessels that were able to show evidence of previously fishing in British grounds. 7 others are under consideration. And England have been fined their entire match fee and docked 5 ICC World Test Championships points for a slow overrate in the first Ashes test. The side was ruled to be 5 short of the target overs. Australia beat England by 9 wickets in Brisbane. I'll be back with a full update in half an hour. Back to Alastair.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and thank you very much indeed for so doing. Now, we read this morning in the papers, we always go through and see what stories that we think are quite interesting, and one was really standout that we were very surprised. We knew that the hospitality industry was having a tough old time, but now small restaurants are having to offer as much as £1,000 sign-on fee just to get new chefs through the door. Such is the shortage of those highly qualified young men and women. According to one job site, the number of posts in the industry offering this fee has soared by over 400% since May. With the shortages of skilled workers in this busy festive season, how will the industry cope? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by a friend of this show, Sahil Ahmed. He's the owner of England. He's not at all. He's the owner of Egoland. Well, I've said it so many times, I don't know why I said England. They provide fast, healthy and delicious food with a Middle Eastern twist, and he's been on the programme before. Does that introduction ring a bell? I mean, it's a start-up business, and you want to roll it out ultimately as a franchise business, but are you finding now that it's tricky to get the staff?
Yeah, it's very difficult to recruit staff, especially all the chefs and people who wanted to work as a front of house. They were all mostly from Europe, and they all gone back. Now in the UK, we don't have enough qualified chefs, and we don't have enough people who wants to work at the front of the restaurants as a waiters and waitresses. So it's very difficult and challenging for people who owns restaurants, especially the small ones that are coming up. It's very difficult.
So, I mean, in that sense, it's a classic, albeit brutal, lesson in supply and demand. If I'm a qualified chef and I'm willing to work, I can pretty well demand the price I want.
Absolutely. I mean, there are chefs who used to get 25,000 or 26,000 a year now demanding £35,000, and they are still needed. There's not enough of them. So I think, learning from this, I think we should all learn to be chefs and go to chefs.
Well, if you watch things like MasterChef and which my wife and I love watching because we love good food and what have you, it's interesting to listen to how many of them are self-taught, like Gordon Ramsay, and how many go through college, however. And if you do it via the college route, then you're talking about 2 or 3 years. So the idea of just conjuring them up at short notice, that's not an opportunity.
No, absolutely not. Obviously, there are certain standards that a restaurant has to maintain in terms of when it comes to food and service and stuff like that. So, as long as you can actually provide that sort of standard for a restaurant, people who are willing to pay, if you go to a restaurant, you don't want to be served by someone who doesn't really know how half to cook, half not to cook. So you want to be, you want to go to a place where people know what they're serving you and they're tasty, and so they can come again. And of course, ultimately, will affect the restaurant's business and the turnover. So yeah, I mean, there are ways. Obviously, you can go to school and learn it. Obviously, there are a lot of people who actually learn on the job in terms of like practical. They work in a restaurant and they learn and to pick things up, and then obviously when they get to a certain level where they think they need to have a certain qualification to apply for higher jobs for a higher salary, that's when they go and do the cooking schools and stuff like that.
The final one on that, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Plan B, if I may, and what it's really like at the front line of it. But when we were talking to another good friend of this programme about the trucking industry and the shortage of lorry drivers, one of the things that he said was quite helpful and hopeful was that there were a number of people that had given up on lorry driving because it had just got too rough and too tough and the money wasn't good enough. Now the wages had gone up a wee bit, they were beginning to come back. I mean, are there people in the hospitality sector like that who, they've cooked their socks off for 30 years, it's a bit hot in there and it's hard work, and they call it a day, they might be tempted back?
Yeah, absolutely. There is demand and there's not enough supply. So those people who had enough of cooking and being in the kitchen every day, they probably say, okay, well, now I can demand more money and I can actually choose the hours and I can demand the hours I want to work in, the days I want to work in, because I'm in need, the people need me. So I'm going through that process right now where it's like, people, they're not, when it comes to taste, there are certain standards I want them to serve, serve me, and they can't do that. And
because it would be dangerous for you and any entrepreneur in the hospitality sector to just have somebody making the numbers up. They've got to be good at what they do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, have an expectation of them, a certain expectation of them to be able to deliver in order for me to pay that money, because obviously I have to also, look at my business and, how is the reputation, how is the people, the word of mouth, the reviews and the people, thinking about the food and how does it taste like. So, it's a tricky situation we're all in, especially people like myself who are just trying to make a name in the hospitality industry and have invested money. And in this tricky time, trying to provide something, and it's hard. It's hard.
So, how did you feel on Wednesday when you heard about Plan B?
Well, I was devastated, to be honest with you, myself, because I'm new. I've only opened like 3 months ago, so I'm like I haven't even got my head out of the water yet, when it comes to my business. So it affects people like myself a lot more than the people who are already established. Because if you're established, you already have a clientele, you already have a name, you have a reputation. People know, okay, Una is good. We'll order you on delivery and stuff like that. Someone like me, there's thousands of them who started new restaurants and new food chains. Affected them more than the bigger ones, because we have to, first of all, trying to build a clientele, trying to build a following, and then we have to, trying to work on like Deliveroo to trying to get, you know what I mean? It's just like we got overheads, rent is quite high. The staff are demanding more money. Everything's gone expensive. The groceries and the meat and the supplies are expensive because of there's certain taxes have gone up in food and everything's gone expensive.
National insurance kicking in April.
Absolutely.
Which is the tougher challenge, though? People being able to come into the restaurant while respecting social distances and the rest of it, or folk who simply won't be coming to restaurants anymore because they're working from home, which is the bigger problem?
I mean, look, I'm in a situation where it's more corporate areas, so all corporate workers and offices are run. Most of my clientele on Monday to Fridays are those people. So now the government obviously giving them a choice. If you can work from home, you can work from home. And it's cold. And if you have a freedom to work from home, it's cold. Why would you want to leave your house? You would probably work from home, right? So then effectively it affects the businesses who are actually surviving on these people, trying to come Monday to Friday, to earn a bread and butter. And in my case, trying to survive.
Well, and ironically, it makes those conversations with Deliveroo and other people like that the more important, because you just want to sell good food.
Exactly, and also Deliveroo and all of these Uber Eats and Just Eat, they charge 30% on their commission. So, they take a lot of money from you. And look, let's just hope that this is not a long thing. And by January, hopefully this all will be relaxed and people will be able to come back to work.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's always great. I know it was a very short notice call, but thank you for responding to it.
You're welcome.
You're always very welcome on this programme.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you, Sahal. And that is Sahal Ahmed, who is the boss of Ego Land. I get it right this time. Take care and look after yourself. Now, we're nearly done, but there were so many of you getting in touch about whether or not you will obey the new COVID rules that I thought it would be rude of me not to read more out. I did say earlier on that we'd run out of time, but a little light negotiation seems to have done the trick. So let me resume. Chris sent an email in saying there's been far too much fraud, U-turns and errors for me to comply any further. It feels more like a power trip and a smokescreen for other failings, not just within government, but public services in general. The deal was 2 jabs, and I've had them, and I'm not being threatened or listening to this fear project anymore. I'm 61 years old and have never seen such a farce that discriminates, controls, and divides people. It's been a living nightmare, and Boris and his cronies need to realise for all the support they claim to have given. Very coherent thought there from one gentleman who has had his jabs. Interesting. And now Gillian sent us an email. I will not be following the restrictions as I believe it is too soon to know what the position is, which will take another 4 to 5 weeks. Well, the professor did say 2 to 3 weeks, but I take your point, Gillian. Take another 4 to 5 weeks, you say, to see what this latest variant is going to do. If people do not want to be vaccinated, then that should be up to them and take away the divisive conversations that people have of calling them out as anti-vaxxers simply because they're basically not doing as they are told. Mark got in touch on email also to say, I have no intention of complying at all. We must accept that getting sick sometimes is a fact of life. And given nobody has been even hospitalised by this version, I think we should encourage everyone, bar the most vulnerable, to catch it, develop some antibodies, and have a much stronger immune system protect naturally against other similar viruses. Seems like an opportunity to me. There we are. Again, further balance points. I would merely say be cautious if you're going down that road. Please, please be cautious. Now, it's time for our Good Causes segment of the programme, where we shine a spotlight on an individual or individuals who've gone above and beyond to make the world a better place. My next guest was devastated after his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 2 years ago. Following a career path into the music industry, performing with a host of famous faces, he is now hoping to raise funds and awareness for the charity by releasing a single for the Alzheimer's Society, as well as performing at a special Christmas concert next week. I'm delighted to welcome singer, songwriter, and very thoughtful, caring person, Andy Huntley, who joins us this afternoon. And there he is, with a lovely, great big smile. I don't want to wipe the smile off your face, but I want to be realistic about this as well. Alzheimer's is the most common form affecting those affecting 50 to 75% of people who are diagnosed. What is your direct connection with it?
So, yeah, as you said, thanks for having me on, first of all. My mother was diagnosed about 2 years ago. It was very, very hard for the whole family to adjust to that. And I mean, we took a lot of learnings as a family, which I want to share with people, raising awareness for the disease, for early diagnosis. My mum was only 64 when she was diagnosed, which is right on the edge of early onset. And there's just so much you can do to prepare before that. And the Alzheimer's Society themselves were there every step of the way for me. They help my dad. They speak to my dad on the phone maybe twice a week and give him support, and they're just there for him. So, yeah, I've got a really good connection with the charity, and I wanted to make a difference. So I'm trying to raise £100,000, which is a big target, but we've just hit our first £10,000, which is really exciting.
That's absolutely brilliant. Before we go into the detail of that, rude of me not to ask you, and it comes from the heart. How's Mum doing at the moment?
I mean, that's a question a lot of people ask. There's no really positive answer for it. She's taking the medication that kind of stabilizes the symptoms a bit, but we know she's not going to get better. So at the moment, it's just trying to give her the best life she can and trying to give my dad the support he needs because he cares for her.
I get involved in various charities as well, and like you, Andy, it's very often because there is that intimate personal connection. But cancer charities, for example, an awful lot of the money that brilliant people like you raise for them goes on research to try and cure it. I get the impression that what you are really about, and the society is really about, is not curing it, because that's not going to happen. It is about making for a better quality of life as things get tougher.
Yeah, so we're trying to cure the care system is a big thing the charity did recently. And as I mentioned about getting the early diagnosis, at the moment, if you go to your GP with symptoms of dementia, their first go-to will be depression. And they'll try you on a course of antidepressants or therapy, which will obviously take a bit of time. And in that time, your Alzheimer's or dementia will be ongoing and progressing. So it's really important to get an early diagnosis, because that gives a bit more power to the person that's suffering with dementia. They can have a say in their future care. You have time to sort out things like affidavits or legal stuff. My mum when she had it, we knew for a while, but it took us a while to get a diagnosis. But something changed overnight one day, and at that point, it was too late to do any of this. To talk about it with her, or talk about her future care or anything like that. So for me, that's really a really important point. Of course, I'd love to find a cure, and there are big steps being taken every day. But the big thing is a lack of funding with dementia and Alzheimer's in research. Like you said, you mentioned cancer charities. They have a lot of funding to research cancer charities. The Alzheimer's and dementia research is very, very underfunded. So the money I'm trying to make will try and, will help the charity with everything, hopefully.
I'm going to share now with folk at home a little of what you do to try and raise that money. So don't you say anything for a moment. Just watch and listen.
Yeah, we light up in the afterglow. We might come together on the open road. Yeah, we light up and let
There you are. Pretty fine. Who's the woman and who are the brilliant gentlemen in red coats?
So the lovely lady is my brother's wife. So it's this charity project. So my brother actually shot the video. He's an award-winning filmmaker.
I tell you, as a professional, he's blooming good. That was a lovely little film.
Yeah, it's great. My niece and nephew are in the video. So I've got my sister-in-law singing, and my little niece Ada and my nephew Oscar. They're sitting with my mum going through old photos, and it's filmed in Blangarry, where my mum grew up as a child, and where me and my brother spent a lot of our childhood. So it's a very family-oriented project, something I started initially to give us something positive to focus on, in a really kind of tough time.
And were the Red Coats a male voice choir?
Yeah, so that's the London Welsh Male Voice Choir that I managed to get on board. An absolutely amazing bunch of lads. They hadn't actually been together for 16 months until we shot the video, so I literally got the band back together, and it was a beautiful thing. I love that. It was always takes me back to when I was a child, hanging out with my granddad at workmen's clubs. You'd sit in a Welsh workmen's club. There'd be a bunch of old Welsh guys, and they just randomly burst into song, and everyone would start, and then everyone would sing along. And we had a moment after we filmed that in Kew Gardens, where we were standing around having a drink afterwards, and one of them started singing, and the whole lot started singing in the middle of the field. It was so beautiful.
OK, I'm going to butt in simply because we're running out of time. This is over plug time, Andy. Special concert to raise money for you. Southwark next week?
Yeah, so Wednesday next week, 7:45 at Southwark Cathedral. So I'm reading it off there to make sure I get it right. We've got the Carols of Christmas concert, which will be virtual this year, unfortunately, because safety is our first concern. So we're doing it virtually. There's a link in my bio on Instagram, which is @AndyJHuntley, if you want to join and live stream it. We've got Sir Jonathan Price, Grace Dent, some amazing guests there. So it's going to be a beautiful occasion. Please buy some tickets and stream it. And also download my record. So this is available on all streaming sites at the moment. And donations through Just Giving. There you go. Donations through justgiving.com/fundraising/find yourself. All the links are in my bio to download. Really appreciate it. Like I said, we've hit our first 10 grand. So we've got a long way to go, but
we genuinely wish you well with it, Andy, and good luck to you and the family, and lots of love to your mum. That's it from me. See you tomorrow, 12 o'clock. A very good afternoon to you.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather damp and cloudy as rain continues to spread eastwards across the UK. The southwest will remain rather cloudy and damp too, with some mist and fog developing across the hills. It'll be feeling mild though, with temperatures remaining in double figures. Moving east, it will be a wet evening across southeast England and East Anglia, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle moving eastwards. After a brief drier interlude, the rain will return across Wales and will turn heavy at times across higher ground, mild with temperatures staying in double figures. Moving on to the Midlands and northwest England, there you will also have a cloudy and damp evening with the heaviest rain across the Pennines. After a cold afternoon, temperatures will be on the rise as the mild air moves in. Northeast England will start the evening on a cold and cloudy note with some patchy rain in places. Temperatures, however, will begin to climb, reaching high single figures throughout the evening. Moving up to Scotland, and it'll be rather cloudy and damp in the south. However, further north, we'll see a mix of clear spells and showers, but feeling chilly here. Northern Ireland will become drier this evening as some clearer skies move in, especially out towards the west of the country. It'll be mild initially, but turning cooler later on. And overnight, it'll remain cloudy and damp for many, but increasingly mild, with the exception of northwestern parts of the country.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.